Hey everybody, welcome back to Treat Dogs Like Dogs podcast. This is episode 5, and today we have Kristina Reed with Reed's Canine Training and Nutrition. And we are actually going to be going over a lot of nutrition topics. So we're going to just deep dive. There's some controversies in them and just fun information to know for, pet owners as well as trainers and anybody across the board that likes their dogs. So, hi, Christina. How are you doing today?
Good. How's it going?
It is going. So, if you want to, since this is the first time on the podcast, if you want to give us a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm actually a professional dog trainer by trade. I started out actually taking dogs off of death row and rehabbing them and rehoming them. So we did a lot of work with behavioral and aggressions where I kind of specialize in. And then I kind of transitioned into the pet world where I really did a lot of pet training. I have a location down in North Dakota and then a second one up here in Alaska. I recently went back to school and got my certification for pet nutrition because I had a dog of my own who had some really bad allergies. He was severely sick, underweight, and nothing we found helped. So I went back to school to learn how to feed raw and kind of just fell in love with that aspect of it. So I kind of do a whole wellness aspect when it comes to dogs, training, nutrition, that all of it.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, no, I've had quite a few conversations with Christina over here. I do a lot of TikTok ties lives, as everybody that follows me knows. And Christina is actually one of my regulars that pops up and we help educate people. And sometimes gets hectic out there. Really
Yeah,
does.
it does.
It's insane sometimes. I love it. So just so you know, I have no filter. I don't mind if you end up cussing or something like that. That's not something I'm worried about. Just so you know, you don't have to
Good.
hold your tongue on this podcast.
That's good to know. Yeah, I am definitely I when I was younger, I used to work with truckers, so
Oh, awesome.
sometimes the language comes out.
It does. I just TikTok has changed me because there's certain things where it's like I really can't say that word. Really?
Yeah.
Like, why not? So but on here it's just no filter. I just say the things. So let's just jump into it. So I know I sent you this list already, and we're probably not going to go over all of it. I don't want
Hmm.
to have you here for 5 hours. We have other things we need to do with our lives. But yeah, we can just jump into it. And if there's anything on here that you saw within the list that you really, really want to discuss, like you're angsty about, like go ahead and
Hmm.
jump in on that too. So under the first thing I have is understanding the importance of balanced nutrition for pets.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize that when you're feeding a dog, it has to be in a balanced diet. We think of as ourselves, we kind of just eat with whatever our body wants and needs. And we crave things that our body's needing, whether it's salt or sugar or any of that. And so dogs have that same mentality. If a dog is out, they will scavenge and find what they need.
Mhm.
If you give a dog a whole, piece of fish or even a, whole prey animal, they will pick out what they need. And so we have to be really careful and keep a dog in a balanced diet. And this is something that concerns me a lot within the social media world because a lot of quote unquote nutritionists will actually um, give unbalanced diets. A big one that we see a lot in the world too is the 80-20 diet. So 80% meat, 20% of organ or of some sort, whether it's liver or a secreting organ of some sort. And it can be very dangerous because dogs need vegetables and fruits
Mhm.
and other, dairy stuff like that, just as much as humans do. So a lot of the times that I recommend for my clients particularly is to follow the AAFCO, which is just the American Association of, feeding you. What I have to pull up what the actual acronym stands
But
for,
AFCO.
but yeah, because I always forget it. But it gives you a guideline of what the animals actually need on a day-to-day basis. And when you're feeding food, you should be finding a food that is actually following their guidelines.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't actually have a certification program where it's certified by them, but
Mhm.
they do have a guideline that they'll say on like on the bag if they are following the same guidelines as them.
Yeah, so it's the Association of American Feed Control Officials.
Yeah. So they handle everything from livestock, horses, cows, pigs, rabbits, dogs, cats, everything. under the sun, really. They kind of give a guideline of what they should be eating and what's healthy for them.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. And I mean, obviously they have a lot of specialists and
Hmm.
nutritionists in there that actually know their stuff. And I'm assuming it's not like across the board, like, oh, I'm a nutritionist for all the animals. You have somebody that specializes in canine and
Yep.
feline and equestrian and so on.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
that's awesome. So since you were talking about the labels, so why don't we talk about a little bit of like decoding pet food labels?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything specific that you have any questions about?
Not me in particular. I know we've talked about this on my lives
Hmm.
before, and so you kind of have an understanding of where I go. If you hear my birds and stuff today, they're just loud. I just let them do their thing. So I'm sorry, podcast. You're just gonna have to hear some birds today. So when I was talking to Reeds about, I think this was like the first time I met you.
Hmm.
We were discussing with some of my listeners and some people that were on the live about decoding pet labels and what I do first, and that's when Reeds popped up and Christina, and and we started really going into detail on it. So what I said originally was, the first thing I do is I'm going to research into the company and find out the also the mother company. Usually there's a parent company that's going to own multiple brands. And so I look into them so that way I can research into recalls. I do want to see what the recall looks like and how they handled the recall,
Hmm.
if they had one. Because even if the pet food was recalled at one point or another or numerous times, if they handled it appropriately, I'm much more likely to trust them. It doesn't mean I'm going to completely dismiss them as a company just because they got recalled. And sometimes they, as you know, Christina, a lot of times they will do self recalls when they find
Hmm.
something, and that's awesome to see when they actually pay attention to their cleaning and things like that so much that they are like, no, this is not acceptable. This is not up to our standards. We're going to recall it ourselves. And I'm completely fine with that. But that's the first thing I look at. And then from there, I'm based on my own personal dogs. I know how much they exercise. I know their breed. I know, their diet that they need. So I look at different dietary things, mainly the macros, the first thing. So like
Hmm.
proteins and fats, right?
Yep.
Is it at a certain level that I need it for my pets? And then from there, I can start looking at the micros. But uh I'm in this industry, I'm in the world of pets, so I have a little more knowledge of it, I'm assuming, than a lot of just regular pet owners. And
Hmm.
so yeah, let's discuss the pet labels a little bit for let's say the average pet owner that might need to know more
Yes.
about it.
So even as a professional, so I read a raw diet for my own dogs, but I help a lot of people who don't want to necessarily take that route or financially can't. Um, I don't even necessarily take the steps of figuring out what the parent company is, just because sometimes, especially where I live in Alaska, it's not always an option. We don't have necessarily a lot of locally sourced foods and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So we do have to do a little bit more either ordering from outside, which makes it more expensive, or we feed a bigger box brand food. And I actually don't necessarily mind that aspect because sometimes having that money really gives them upper hand and it allows for more testing. So a big thing that a lot of people are kind of having a kickback for is Purina, particularly the Pro Plan,
Mhm.
is they're calling them death nuggets and saying that they're a terrible food to feed when really, yes, there's some recalls coming in, but it's
If
one of
you
those
see me smack myself, I have a
Yep.
mosquito in here that just landed on my forehead. And I'm in Florida, so mosquitoes over here are
Yep.
just no joke. They follow me in. And yeah, so anybody on the YouTube podcast got to just see me smack myself in the forehead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I
sorry,
like it.
continue.
No, you're totally good. Yeah. So the big thing that there's a huge clapback on Purina and that aspect of, oh well, there's recalls, it's concerning, it's bad, whatever it may be. And really it's actually a better thing to sometimes have a recall because you know that they're doing their due diligence, they're making sure that the food is proper, they're testing it. And yes, things get through no matter how big.
Mhm.
And this is something that is very scary in the dog world in general is um most places actually don't have any kind of breakdown requirements of how food needs to be made. So I know up here in Alaska, down in North Dakota, a lot of places, each state has their own guidelines of what you need to do, and a lot of states don't have any actual guidelines like you don't have a food handler's permit, you don't have to be in a commercial kitchen, and so food can just be made however they want it to be. And they then will be more strict depending on which state they send it to. So sometimes like big companies will set all their standards on the most strictest city or the
Mhm.
state, and then they'll kind of do it for all their food. So like when they send it out, it doesn't have to necessarily, it's not a hard issue with distributing.
So
But go ahead.
sorry. So when it comes to big box brands,
Hmm.
I think, in my personal opinion, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is that big box brands, when they're making food in that quantity, it's more likely that they are going to have some product issues, recalls and things like that, because they're on such a large quantity of creating a product. Is that something safe to assume?
I think that can, yes, and I think that kind of just goes with everything though.
Mhm.
I don't want to, I am not sponsored by them.
I'm not saying quality is going to lower. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is, for instance, you can have, I don't know the exact process of making the food, but let's say, you have your giant cooking kiln or whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
right? You can
The
have
more
one or
ingredients you add
two.
into it, the higher chance
Mhm.
of contamination there's going to be.
That
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then the quantity that you have of those machines or anything you use, instead of
Hmm.
having to clean one, you have to clean 1,500. And
Yeah.
so there's
Oh,
going to be
absolutely.
certain things that just fall through the cracks once in a blue moon.
Yep. Yep. But then that is absolutely, and I think that that comes with, and that's why standards should be set a much
Mhm.
higher,
Yeah.
and there needs to be it across the board. That's a big thing that we're still kind of fighting in
Hmm.
the nutrition world is people don't understand the lack of um
Hmm.
structure, it's the same thing with dog training where you don't actually have to have any kind of certifications to call yourself
Yep.
a dog trainer. It's a coined term that is anybody can use.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's definitely that aspect of lack of guidelines, lack of stuff that they have to follow. So there is a lot more. It's a lot lax. It's a lot easier to have stuff like that happen. Kind of going back into the labeling aspect though, is I think ingredients is a really important aspect to help people kind of figure out how to feed their dogs in a safe way. There's a huge, the FDA actually recently came out with a study that showed that peas and legumes and even potatoes are actually linked to cardiomyopathy, which is the thinning of the lining of the heart. And so it kind of becomes a situation where, especially with the grain-free diet, peas and
Hmm.
legumes and potatoes were huge in the aspect of being great fillers. They had a great protein as well. And I know we've kind of talked about this on TikTok as well. And there's been a huge debate on whether peas and legumes should be in food or not. They've always been in there, but they've always been very low. And so
Hmm.
what's happened, especially as people are starting to read their ingredients more, is companies are doing what's called ingredient batching. So they'll actually take an ingredient and they'll call it 3 or 4 different things and make it look like it's lower on the ingredient list so that by the time it actually is printed out, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of, green peas or green beans or pea
Hmm.
protein. They're all broken down into such smaller ingredients that when you put them together, they actually are one of the top ingredients. So that's something you have to really watch for whenever you're looking for dog
Hmm.
foods.
No, for
That's my
sure.
number one go-to.
Yeah, I pull up the Purina Pro Plan, high protein dry puppy food,
Yep.
just because I just want to see what the
The 30,
the
30,
label looks like.
20.
Right here is 2818 for
Okay.
the protein fat. So yeah, I mean, we know that usually when it's the first ingredient, like chicken's on this one, that's going to be
Hmm.
the highest quantity. But as you were saying, when you add all the other ones, they could possibly be more than that chicken.
Yep.
Um, okay, yeah, that's something I never thought about. So that's really good to know. So I mean, there's always going to be different scientific terms and things like that for different
Hmm.
supplements that a lot of us aren't going to know what they are. Like,
Yeah.
I like this though. That for instance, thiamine mononitrate is
Hmm.
then it says in parentheses vitamin B1. So I
Yeah.
like that this brand actually tells you exactly what it is, which is really nice. So when it comes to the guaranteed analysis, what does that even mean? Guaranteed analysis.
So they break it down and they actually so it depends on how they're testing for vitamins. It's the guaranteed analysis is it's going to be within these parameters.
Okay. Okay.
So,
So, for instance, a crude protein, it says minimum 28%.
yep.
So the guarantee
Yep.
analysis is that it at minimum it has 28%, but it could be more. Is that what
Yep.
it's saying? Okay.
Yep. Hmm.
Uh,
And that's really going to depend bite by bite.
Okay.
because it's mixed together and then it's cooked down, you might have a little bit more of, the byproduct on one side and then more vegetables on the other. But as a collective in that food, every time you grab a scoop, there's going to be, a minimum of 28% protein.
Okay. So one thing that I've always looked at as well, because it's always between like 8 and 13 or whatever percentage the moisture, right? The
Hmm.
max moisture, 12% on this one.
Yep.
Um, do they put that on there just so that way the food is not going to be too moist, so it's not going to mold on you?
No,
Uh,
so the moisture content is how much they cooked it down. So you have to have for a kibble, and the same thing with like corn when they put it into a silage, stuff like that. Um, you have to have it be between a certain percentage so it won't mold, but it also tells you how much your body's going to have to
mhm.
reprocess, and it also tells you how much they've cooked it down. So if there's only 5 or 6% moisture in there, then that means
One
that
second.
they have,
Guys, come
yep.
on, come on. No playing right now. You're going to be very loud, okay? All right, we can play later. You're about to meet one of my dogs.
I love it.
Nazi, come here. Come on. You want to say hi? Come here. Come here. Come say hi. Come say hi. Okay.
Oh.
This is Nazi. This is my Catahoula. Okay. You just want some love. All right. Come on, down.
Hmm.
Down. Oh, I know. All right. So continue.
No,
Moisture.
you're totally good. So moisture can be, it tells you how much they've cooked down the kibble. So the less moisture, the longer it's cooked, which actually means a lot of times it's the more vitamins they have to supplement in. So the longer you cook it, the hotter it is, the more supplements that are and there's a huge debate on synthetic versus natural supplements, and that's a huge conversation that we can have at some point.
Oh yeah, well, we may
So
have to have a
that
separate episode just for that.
it does so it does tell you kind of where it is within how
Hmm.
long it's going to last. It also tells you how long they cooked it, and then it gives you an idea of roughly um what kind of vitamin content it's going to have as well.
Okay, so when you it doesn't say on here anywhere if it was synthetic or not for the supplements.
So
Is there a
most
way you
yeah
can know?
so not necessarily unless it specifically states that a food has a certain vitamin in it that is a natural vitamin. It's usually synthetic, it's usually added in.
Okay.
There's it's a nature's balance, I believe we have up here,
Hmm.
and primarily most of the vitamins that are added in are non-synthetic. It is all yeast-based, fermentation, stuff like that. But and they really kind of claim themselves on synthetic or non-synthetic vitamins, but
Hmm.
when you have a food, I don't care how much you ferment your kombucha or your yeast, if you put it to a certain temperature, it's still going to kill off vitamins. So
Hmm.
there is always going to be some synthetic vitamin added in. It just is your body's just going to process it slightly different. It's the same thing with people who take vitamin D because in the wintertime, it's still helpful. Your body just may process it a little bit different.
Yeah, so what are the what's the role of the nutritional supplements in the pet's health?
Like adding in other supplements.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, if you're feeding an already like AAFCO based food, I don't think it's necessary. The only time that you ever want to add in vitamins when you are feeding a food that is already under recommendation is something like a chondroitin or glucosamine, where you're going to help with like hip and joint issues. Otherwise, you actually start to throw your dog's body off. And it's just like people, and I actually went to school for human nutrition for a while before I transitioned to dog. And we always joke, I say, your body's going to need certain vitamins, and it's good to have a multivitamin, but a lot of times it's just an expensive pea is what you're creating. Your
Okay.
body is going to hold on to what they do need, but most of the time, if you're eating a balanced diet, whether it's for your dog or for yourself, all that's just going to go straight into your pee, and it can actually cause issues long term. And
Hmm.
it can actually, if you're eating too much calcium, you can have stones in your
Yep.
urinary tract, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Let's see. We can jump on to we did pet food labels. Specialized diets for pets. So yeah, so
Hmm.
I actually was on somebody else's live earlier today and they brought up how infuriating it is when they see somebody that puts their dog on like a vegan diet. Um
Yes.
so I mean unless it's like medically necessary. My personal
Hmm.
feeling is there's no reason to put a dog on a vegan diet. Um, I feel like it would be detrimental to their health, but I could be wrong. That's why I have you here.
Yeah, so vegan diets have been shown to actually be very detrimental to dogs' health because the level of protein and all the vitamins that they're needing, particularly from meat and
Hmm.
muscle meat in that fact, is um it can be really hard on their body. Secondary, there is the level that dogs came from wolves at one point, and their stomachs over time have changed with pH balance. When you feed a raw diet, it actually increases your dog's stomach pH, which helps with tartar. It helps with dental disease. It actually helps with joints. There's a huge improvement to your dog overall when you feed a raw diet, because of that increase of pH. And so when you are feeding like a uh, vegetarian diet, a vegan diet, whatever you want to say do, you actually are taking away a lot of that natural pH in their gut, and you're minimizing the ability of them to naturally regulate their teeth issues, and you're creating long-term effects in that dog that are unrecoverable, really, is what it comes down to.
Wow.
When I think of specialized diets, I usually think of like a dog that's actually needing to be on something. But a
Hmm.
big thing that people still talk about today, and it's still a huge thing, is the grain-free diet. And it's a lot like people are starting to have issues with peanut butter. If your dog
Hmm.
isn't eating something, they're going to there's a potential for them developing a allergy to it. So if you're already
Hmm.
not feeding, or you're already feeding a grain-free diet, if your dog develops something else, you are then that much more limited in what you're feeding. So you want to be able to feed a full grain, whether it's an ancient grain or a rice base, whatever it is, you want to have that in their diet so that they become accustomed to it, their body gets naturally used to it. And then if they develop, skin allergies, you have somewhere to transfer to, instead of being stuck to potentially going to a raw diet and even then being limited in that aspect.
Yeah, yeah. So, what's an ancient grain? For any viewers that don't know.
An ancient grain can be anything from um it can be a whole grain rice, it can be a rice bran. I'm trying to think back what other um it typically isn't corn because that's a GMO and they aren't the same as they were before. So
And
I
that's
think of a
pretty
lot
much
of
what an
like
ancient grain is.
oatmeal.
Is a grain that just hasn't changed
Yeah.
over time.
Oatmeal's a really great ancient grain, stuff like that. It's just that and it typically is the whole grain itself, not just like if you do white rice, there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of times you'll see brown rice because it has the shell on it, which actually gives them um phyllosome, which is a fiber. So the reason that we do whole grains like oats and whole grain rice and stuff like that is because
Mhm.
you want both the outer fiber as well as the carbohydrate of the actual internal grain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes plenty of sense. So, as far as the specialized diets goes, like you were just talking about allergies, I know that from my knowledge, chicken is pretty much like the first protein that dogs will become allergic to. Is it because what you said your feed is one of the primary proteins found in most dog foods?
It's actually because they're not genetically designed to eat it.
Okay. Oh wow.
So if you think about an animal, you know, ducks are a red meat.
Hmm.
Turkeys they're kind of a red meat, but they're not very common for wild animals to feed on them. So most of their diet is coming from a red meat, not
Hmm.
from a white meat. So they're not conditioned to that as much. It's a really easy protein for them to become allergic to, or it's something that their body naturally can't digest as well as a red meat, so they tend to have higher allergies to it.
So I hear all the time that like for dogs that are having digestion issues,
Hmm.
rice and chicken.
Hmm.
But from what it sounds like is like a lot of dogs will have a hard time digesting chicken.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, so the bland diet is what you're referring to. It's
mm,
usually, boiled chicken or beef and some rice and maybe some pumpkin. What you're doing is it's less about the actual protein itself. It's more of just getting a protein source, getting some vitamins in, and getting a starch to help
the
hold
fecal
their stomach
matter.
together.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, hold it together. And so that's really the breakdown of it. And they've actually shown that debunked that the bland diet really actually isn't all that helpful for dogs.
Hmm.
Um, just because they're It's like living off of chicken noodle soup. It may make you feel good for a day or two, but if you stay on it for a long time,
Yeah, so
it's not gonna.
that's how I've always done it. For if my dogs have upset stomachs,
Mhm.
I don't do chicken, because I already know they're very allergic to chickens, and I don't
Yeah.
want to deal with that scratching, biting at their
Hmm.
skin. But I eat. They're picky, so they won't eat the rice. But if I mix like the rice water with their food,
Hmm.
that really helps. But it's only a very temporary fix. It's only a couple
Yeah.
days, and then from
Yep.
there we just it's solved, and we move on to regular feeding.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like I'm a you will notice probably for this conversation, I'm a reference person, so I love giving references. And
Hmm.
I always say that the bland diet is the same equivalent that I was raised on is saltines and Sprite. Like
Yeah.
makes you feel better, it's easy to digest, it's easy for your body to handle. And even just giving, like you said, the rice water, a lot of those starches actually are excreted out into the water, so it is a
Hmm.
thickening agent. That's how you get cornstarch or rice starch, whatever you may
Hmm.
use. And so it actually is just as good because it's still giving it's almost like a coagulant. It firms up their poop. It helps with kind of just holding everything together so that because diarrhea can and I apologize, I'm using,
You could
maybe
get,
not so
yeah,
pleasant
it's
terms,
all good.
but diarrhea is a very dangerous issue in dogs
Hmm.
because it dehydrates them very fast. So
Yep.
if you're able to add in a starch of some sort and a fiber, it helps actually they hold their water better and they are less prone to getting dehydration.
Yeah. So for allergy prone dogs or dogs that
Hmm.
already display, allergies, let's say chicken and some other
Hmm.
proteins, um, one go-to that I've always looked at was like rabbit or kangaroo.
Hmm.
As somebody told me at one point that kangaroo is like almost impossible for a dog to form allergies to. Is that accurate at all?
I don't know. I think that there's a chance that anybody can, any dog can form an allergy.
Hmm.
I think being at red meat, it's typically not as common, so that's
Hmm.
going to be more debunked. I also think that with at least in the US, it's not used as much, so you're not going to hear about as many allergies.
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of the less it's used, the less it's you're going to be heard about, the less chance there's going to be an allergy of. I'd be curious to talk to somebody who lives in Australia who, maybe does nutrition
Hmm.
and works more with that. But it's kind of the similar aspect to feeding venison or beef.
Hmm.
Most dogs, I rarely have heard of dogs having an allergy to beef in the same standard because it's that red meat. It's something that's natural to their
Hmm.
digestion.
Yeah, whenever I do training, I always use like freeze-dried rabbit for the
Yep.
training treats.
And rabbit's a great red meat.
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah,
great protein source. It's really high in protein. It's really low in fat.
yeah.
It's a great option.
So the reason why I use it particularly is because across the board, any dog that I work with, I don't have to know what his allergies are when it comes to
Hmm.
that because most likely they're not going to be allergic to it.
Yep.
And so even though it's a little more expensive, I don't have to have 40 different proteins just to mitigate dogs' allergies when I'm training.
And I do the same thing. And this sounds terrible, and judgment can come as it may, but excuse me. But we butcher a lot of horses up here.
Hmm.
We don't raise them for meat. They are pets that live a long, wonderful life, and at some point they hit their time, and we instead of just wasting them,
Yeah,
we
they get used.
use them for hort
That's
for meat. And
amazing.
so we turn all of our go into treats. Sometimes we sell them. Typically, I use them all for training for myself, and again, it's very rare that a dog is going to be allergic to it. It's a red meat. It's very safe, and it's high protein, low fat, so we know that they're going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. What about weight management type diets? Like, what would you like? Let's just dive into that a little bit
Sure.
because I know. So we talked about this before, so I want to bring it up here. My opinions on, let's say, uh, Purina, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over the last, and I think I told you before, over the last 10 years, they have done a fantastic job with upping their game in the pet food world. Yes, they do have
Yeah.
their, big box Walmart style brands that are super cheap, but they do extremely well with their higher end products as well as doing third party studies on their
Yep.
product,
Yep.
which I love that. Not many brands will do that. And then the
No,
science
and it's
diet.
expensive.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. But they're investing in themselves. They're
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm gonna reach out, I'm gonna have an unbiased third party come in
Mhm.
and then let y'all know what they think of our product. And if it's good, that just raised their customer base. So
Mhm.
they're investing in themselves, and that's a great way to do it.
Well, and
Now,
it one, I think I apologize not to cut you off, but
mhm.
one, it holds them accountable so that they have to make sure that everything they're doing is up to their standards, but they're also setting a standard for all the other dog
Oh yeah.
foods. This
Yeah.
is a big thing that just in the dog world, as owners are becoming more educated, they're setting a standard, and
Yep.
so the pet, the trainers, the food companies, everything else is having to set a whole new standard of care and a level. Dogs be in 1800s, the dogs just lived off of scraps, and they
Yep.
literally just ate whatever was in the yards between people's houses, and most people didn't own a dog. They just kind of lived there, and
Hmm.
that's how it was. And then the early 1900s is when kibble really came out, and they were like, let's actually, people are wanting to take these dogs in, let's give them a kibble. So just in the 100 years or so, we have such a different expectation of what should be in food. And even in just the last 10 years, is pet owners are really setting
Hmm.
standards, and I'm 30. I don't have any kids. My
Yeah.
dogs are my kids. That is, we're, what is it, the dual income,
Hmm. Yeah.
no kid family, and I got two dogs. Like that's my family. And so I have a standard that I have that I would, as if they were my children. And I
Hmm.
think that's wonderful because it's setting standards for that way. Period is setting a standard for all the other dog foods. And if you don't follow suit, you don't succeed. And I think that's a phenomenal way to think about that.
Yeah, so with the weight management thing, the reason why I brought Purina up is
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of veterinarians will push Purina, and
Mm-hmm.
and the reason why, as I've talked to you before, is because they do the third party research, and
Yeah.
so they're tested. It's research, and
Mm-hmm.
any medical doctor is gonna love research,
Yeah.
like for sure. But then we have the other side, where veterinarians push science diet a lot. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had to explain to plenty of people because there's this misconception that, oh, veterinarians push science diet because they get a kickback. It's because it's just been very reliable for certain, nutritional needs, whether it's weight management or a dog that has a very particular dietary need because of whatever reason. They've been
Mm-hmm.
consistent and reliable, and that's why vets go to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so
Well, and that's why they kick weight management and just a general overall great food is usually Purina, because it is third party tested. It
mhm,
is usually a safe option.
yeah.
The reason they use but they're not a great limited ingredient diet
Mhm.
program, because they do tend to change their food bag to bag, or batch to batch,
Hmm.
whereas science diet is specifically, it is, they have taken the science, they have taken the time, they are actually looking at each ingredient, and that each bag you're going to buy is going to be the same bag. And a lot of times food won't happen, that won't happen with dog food. They'll I've had this exact issue when I was first getting into nutrition. Is my boy, he's allergic to chicken and anything chicken byproduct, egg flavoring, chicken flavoring, anything that you could think of that came with that. He was allergic to it. And so we couldn't use Purina, because from month to month we would have to double check the bag content, and sometimes it would have an egg even though it was a red meat based diet. And
Hmm.
so that's why they have that's because there's no other brand out there that is being that diligent and making sure that their food is that consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, when it comes to like weight management,
Hmm.
obviously there's some medical conditions that can cause issues and stuff, and
Hmm.
that's why we have, special diets and see veterinarians, or well, nutritionists. I try to say vets aren't nutritionists unless they're a veterinarian nutritionist.
Yeah.
But but when it comes to weight management, I feel it's very similar to human weight management, to where when we calorie count our own meals and stuff, a lot of
Hmm.
people forget that, soft drinks, little tiny snacks here and there and stuff, all that adds up. So a lot of
Hmm.
times I feel like a lot of dogs that are, let's say, overweight, it's because you're either feeding them too much food, or you're forgetting about all the little treats you're giving throughout the day as well on top of the
Yeah.
food. And so when it comes to weight management, what can you do? Does the dog get enough exercise? enough exercise, or how much exercise is the dog getting compared to how much food you're feeding?
So I actually had a PSA trainer back when I first got into this world, and the first thing they taught me is follow the 70-30 rule. And I don't know if you've heard of this yourself. But and I don't necessarily I don't do PSA. I am not a sports working dog. I showed horses my whole life, and I am
Mhm.
not a competition person anymore. And that I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But they taught me to follow the 70-30 rule, which is 70% of their diet needs to come from their bowl and 30% needs to come from your hand.
Hmm.
So the more that is coming from your hand, the less needs to come from your bowl and vice versa. If you are not going to be giving, if you're not doing a training day, their full meal needs to come into their bowl. If you are doing a training day, then you need to minus what you're training to what they're feeding. And I think that's a really important kind of breakdown because it gives you a good, visual of, okay, 70% of the food needs to come this aspect, 30 from here.
Hmm.
And then you also can factor in, and that can even play from like if you want to give them scraps or, anything else
Hmm.
fun, or if they get a bone, they can have so much time with that bone, but it has to be within limitations of what they should be
Oh
eating
yeah,
total.
that's smart. That's smart. So what I actually do, because my dogs get daily training, that's just how I
Mm-hmm.
am, because I that's my career.
Yep.
So what I do with my dogs is from their morning or afternoon or evening feeding or whatever, what I like to do is from each of their portion, I actually bag up some of that, and that's their training treats for the day, is their kibble.
Yeah,
So that
absolutely.
way I'm keeping their diet exactly where it needs to be without adding extras. And the time that I'll go to like the rabbit or training treats and stuff is when I need a higher level treat
Yeah.
versus their motivators.
Yep.
But most of the time when I train my dogs, it's using their own kibble.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take it from their portion, and now there's going to get their full portion, but it's throughout the day with
Yep.
training rather than right then and there.
And this is something I kind of want to get off topic on just a little bit. It's
Hmm.
still dog training related, but um, feeding multiple times a day will hinder your training. And this is a big thing. Free feeding, feeding multiple times a day. Once
Hmm.
your dog hits about 6 to 8 months old, depending on their size, you should be down to once a day feeding. And that is going to help your training long term because your dog is fasting. Their metabolism is going to slow down. You actually can feed them less, and it becomes healthier for them. Their body is there. There was a recent study that came out that actually showed that feeding a dog once a day is healthier than twice a day, like we've thought for a
Hmm.
long time. And it is so much better for them health wise. Again, like I said, in all
I'm
aspects, it's
glad you
better,
went over
but also
this.
it's
Yeah.
for training wise as well. As a
Hmm.
trainer myself, if your dog is eating 3 or 4 times a day, they have no motivation to
Hmm.
want to follow you with that food, even if it's high value.
Yeah, so I feel that, even with me sometimes, like I have this whole like treat dogs like dogs thing, right? That, I mean, it's the
Hmm.
name of the podcast. It's on the back of my training shirts. I tell people all the time. But even me, my human emotion goes into things sometimes,
Hmm.
and trying not to anthropomorphize my dogs, but it's like, oh, I fed them in the morning. I can't believe, like, they're probably hungry tonight. I feel so bad for them. But if you really think about that, if these dogs were living in the wild, feral dogs in the wild, they're scavengers. They're going to eat what they can, and so a lot of that time is fasting between
Yep.
the times they find those
Hmm.
meals.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
so
it is typical if you are doing if they were out in the wild, whether and I'm not necessarily saying as wolves, but there is a level of wolves as well as they eat once every couple of days. They
yeah.
gorge themselves out, and then their body's metabolism slows down and holds on to that food so that it lasts them longer
Hmm.
until they are ready for their next meal. And so it's been shown that dogs have a similar stomach to wolves in that aspect, that they also handle a once a day meal as well. And it also helps with potty training.
Hmm.
You start doing a longer time as you hit 6 months, 8 months old with a dog in their kennel. If you feed them once a day, they're going to poop once a day. You feed them
Hmm.
twice a day, they're going to poop twice a day. You feed them 3 times a day, they're going to be pooping three, four,
Oh
five
yeah.
times a day, depending on how, because it's just going straight through
Yeah,
them.
with that once a day as well, because I mean, I'm on 2 times a day, and it's
Mm-hmm.
almost the exact same times every day with the exact same quantity, and I can pretty much
Yep.
time it at this point the couple times they're
Yep.
going to poop through the day. So if it's a one
Yep.
time, you'll know exactly, okay,
Yep.
I feed them, and then when I let them out, they don't do anything, but the next time I
Mhm.
let them out, they are going to poop. And
Yep.
and you can pretty much time it, so that's going to definitely help with potty training.
It
So
is. But it also helps because dogs like routine in general. So for me, I feed at 7. I've changed it to 6 o'clock just because we sometimes are going out, and so we feed at 6 o'clock. They get to do their pottying. They have free access to go in and out as they want. And next morning, my husband gets up at 5:30, 6 o'clock. They go out, they go poop. They know the routine. They come inside, they take a second nap while I'm doing my sleep until I wake up about 7:30, and they're ready to go. And then I don't see them. They don't poop all day. And then they eat, and then they process, they sleep overnight, they're digesting, and then the next morning they're ready to poop again. And so it's such a good routine. They know where to potty, they know when to potty, they know what the routine is. And so if I ever have to go anywhere, I know that, if I travel with my German Shepherd, he flies with me. He's, I train him as for my service dog. I know that at 7:30, no matter where, 7:30 Alaska time, he's going to have to poop. I just need to find somewhere for him to poop. He knows where to do it. That's the end of it.
Awesome.
And if we need to, we can change that schedule. And I know there's what time, how long it's going to take from when I feed him to when he's going to need to go to the bathroom.
No, that's awesome. So you feed at nighttime or in the evening?
Yeah.
Okay, so is that what you would recommend? Is evening versus morning feeding?
I don't think it's what's easiest for your lifestyle.
Okay,
So
cool.
I think that's more of that's more helpful than having one at a time or the other. For me, I am all over the place in the morning. I have doggy daycare coming in. My facility in North Dakota is 3 hours ahead of me. So I am, it is crazy for me to be answering phones at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. So I just don't have time. I don't have time to sit there. I have large breed dogs, and they are very prone to bloat even with raw diet. And so it's really hard to have them sit in a kennel for 30 minutes to an hour after they've been eating, when they're all hyped up and ready to go for the day. It's a lot easier for me to feed in the evening. Other people who maybe have really calm, nice mornings and that can take that time, I think it's great. And if that works best for your schedule, that's the most important aspect, is whatever works best
That's
for you.
awesome. Yeah, no, evenings would work better for me. So since I'm on twice a day, and I'm sure anybody else listening to this that's like, okay, I might want to start doing the one time a day. How would I transition that? Because like right now it's like, okay, I know how much I feed in the morning and at night. Do I just combine that all for the evening, or okay, and that's
you
just
can
how I transition?
Yep. That is one of those things that you can cold turkey it. Sometimes, if you have a smaller breed dog, we definitely recommend at least doing a little bit in the morning, because they're getting such a small amount of food that their stomach sometimes can't even handle all of that food. And I mean like Chihuahuas,
Yeah,
Papillons, very small dogs.
like under
By the time you get
15
up,
pound type dogs.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you start getting up to like the Cavaliers and Bichons, stuff like that. Like, you're usually pretty good. And even if you're just given a little bit in the morning and then the rest of it at night, but yeah, it's helpful. You can cut it right it's cold turkey, set it right in. But the big issue with that though is no matter how big your dog is, but obviously as they get bigger, you need to make sure that you are giving your dog time to process after they eat, because they're prone to bloating. And what bloating is after a dog eats, their body's actually going to use its stored water to rehydrate the kibble. So I always say add water or something to help hydrate the kibble. And so you want to add something to your food, but also you got to think, when your dog's running around, their stomach is sloshing around with all this food in it, with all this water that's being added from their own body trying to rehydrate it, and they go running around and they flip over, whatever, that stomach is going to flip, and then they can't throw up and they can't defecate. And so what has happened now is your dog has got twisted gut. Nothing can move back or forth, and you have all this kibble that is hydrating, and it's yeast based, whether it's corn or whatever's in there, it's going to swell up, and then you have all the stomach acid, and it's going to start to ferment, and it's going to build gas, and then your dog is going to swell up, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And at some point, depending on how long your dog is bloating, the intestine will start to die off, their stomach will stretch out, and they will go so far into the point to that it's not recoverable, and it can be a matter of hours before death ensues. And so making sure that you have hydration in your dog's food is really important, and then making sure your dog is settled, whether it's a place command or in their kennel or wherever it is, so that they're not running around, jumping, being idiots after they eat, to prevent bloat. It's the same thing too with training, is minimizing treats when they're doing a running activity, so that they don't have the opportunity for stuff to be sloshing in their stomach.
So how long in between like feeding and then heavy activity would you say in that case?
For anything over 50 pounds, usually 30 minutes to an hour, kind of like the
Yeah,
swimming.
because they have
If
a
it's
really fast digestion.
Yeah.
Dogs do, yeah.
Kibble does take a little bit longer than raw, so 30 minutes to an hour. If you're under 50 pounds, usually I say thumb, rule of thumb is anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes
Hmm.
minimum, up to the hour. And that's kind of and under 50,
Yeah.
I still say recommend an hour, but you can get away with closer to 30 minutes.
Okay. No, that's very useful information. I'm actually starting tomorrow. I'm going to start switching that over. That's great
And
information. Yeah, I
from
like
a
it.
training standpoint, though, I talk a lot about mental stimulation, and feeding is a great time to include mental stimulation.
Hmm.
And so make it a fun thing. We do a lot of popsicles. We just take the whole
Hmm.
bowl of food, we pour in broth or coconut milk or, whatever they find fun. Some dogs just like plain water. Freeze it, put it in and just make a huge popsicle and give it to them and let them sit there for 20, 30 minutes and just chew out their food and work through it. It's such a fun way
Oh,
to
sure. Yeah.
give stimulation while also making sure they're eating
Hmm.
slow and to not cause bloat.
Yeah, so what I'll probably end up doing with their food is in the evening, I'll probably feed them like everything but half a cup. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'll store that for the morning. So that way in the morning I
Yep.
can utilize that as their treats for
Yep.
training. So that's
That's
probably what I'll
perfect.
end up doing. But yeah, even I'm the same way as you. In the morning, it's like go, go, go for me.
Yep.
And then in the evenings, like you see right now, I can sit down and have this
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier for feeding. So that will help me out a ton, and looks like it's going to help them out too. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. So you did mention raw food. There's a
Yeah.
huge debate on raw food and the raw food diet, right? And so, what are some like pros, cons, and myth of the raw food diet?
So the number one myth that everybody always finds that you can never get an answer on because there's always an opinion about one way or the other is dogs can have raw chicken bones. It is something that is safe. They
Just
they
not cooked,
become
right?
correct. Yes.
Okay.
So when they are cooked, particularly once they hit that 165 plus, and even they become really easily brittling and they break off into shards that become dangerous for the dog and they can choke. They can actually puncture their trachea, they can puncture their esophagus and even their stomach. And so it can become a danger to them long term. Whereas um, a bone is still having the potential to do that, there's a significantly less chance of it as a raw bone. Also, you're getting a lot of really great vitamins. You get potassium, magnesium, nitrates, citrates. There's so many great things about raw bones in general. So it's a huge myth. Another one is uh, even cooked, but any kind of T-bone steak or a bone that is cut with a machine is not safe for a dog. Uh, because even if they aren't cooked, because they are already pre-cut, they have the chance of shattering and breaking off, and they will do the same thing as a cooked chicken bone. So I grew up in a generation where, oh yeah, we'll just give the dogs the T-bone steaks, the bones afterwards, not a big deal.
Hmm.
And it's highly, highly dangerous. It's the same thing with you'll go to the pet store or even the grocery store and you'll get the marrow bones and they'll be cut in half, but they're teeny tiny and they get them caught underneath their
Hmm.
jaws. Very, very dangerous.
So, I feel like a bad pet parent now because I have been giving them like the T-bones after.
Hmm.
Oh man, that's good to know.
But
This is
it's the
changing
same thing
my.
with ribs.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like even me, as a pet care professional, like my business has won multiple awards, it's just,
Hmm.
heavy recommendations, doing wonderful things in this industry. Like even I have things to learn,
Yeah.
and it's okay. It's completely okay.
But I think if you're
Yeah.
not learning, you're not being a good professional.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
think that's the most important
I think
aspect.
with animal husbandry in general, if you're not trying to continue learning about the
Hmm.
animals that you're raising and keeping, uh,
Hmm.
you're not doing justice for that animal.
Hmm.
So it doesn't
Well,
matter if you're a professional or just a owner.
but there's
Hmm.
technology is advancing so far that what we knew 5 years ago is nothing compared to what we know now, and that's not even necessarily a lack of anybody. It's not a lack on anybody, but just the fact that technology has given us so much new advancement, so much ability to learn about dogs that we couldn't even have known
Yeah,
5 years ago.
yeah.
That's a really important aspect.
Unfortunately about technology that I've noticed is that you do have a lot of navigating around misinformation. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the only problem. Like you have all the information out there, you just have to decipher what is the actual information. Um,
And that's the scary part about Google. I follow a lady on TikTok. She's a oh my gosh. I'll have to send you her name, and I don't remember it at this moment. But hold on.
Hmm.
My husband just got home. Um but there's a lady on TikTok, and she did a paper on canines, disproving that they are pack animals. And if a lot of people kind of argue with her and go, well, if you Google "are dogs pack animals?" it's going to say yes.
But
And
they're
what
not.
and that's the thing, is it's been Googled so much that Google assumes and thinks that that's the right answer because that's
Um,
been what has been preset.
mhm,
So if you ask it in a different way, it'll actually show you that they're not, and it'll give you the right
mhm.
information. But Google is very much it's support of the masses, not support of the information.
Yeah, yeah. For
And so
anybody
unless you
listening
know how to
in,
use it.
oh yeah, for sure. For anybody listening in, no, dogs are not pack animals.
Yep.
They don't have a familial pack like wolves do.
Mhm.
There also are no alphas in
Mhm.
social groups of dogs. The alphas in wolves are the breeding pair, and then their pack are usually their offspring. With dogs, if you have a dog that tends to be a dog that is the pack leader, if that's what you want to call it, of your household. The reason why is because they are stuck in that environment with the exact same members every single day.
Mhm.
If you see a social group of dogs that are feral, what you're going to see is they come and go. They
Mhm.
don't just stick to one single group, and also the leader of the group can change hour by hour, day by day. But they are social animals that they actually group up mainly for trying to find food and things like that, resources. But other than that, they could care less about grouping up. But yeah, just so anybody knows that wants to talk about alpha theory and dominance and packs. I'm not saying dogs can't be dominant. As a trait, some dogs can be more submissive and some dogs can be more dominant as a personality trait. But dogs in general don't want to dominate you or dominate other dogs.
I mean, if you're looking for a good reference, her name is Amy Cook. She's under Amy Cook PhD on TikTok.
Hmm.
She has written multiple papers on this explaining that. And the way that she verbalizes, and I think you did a really good way of explaining it, but how she explains it is the meaning of a pack is a family raising their young together,
Hmm.
where is a dogs are cohabitating creatures.
Hmm.
They are not raising their young together. And
Yep.
so that's the biggest aspect, is people want to call it a pack when a pack is all family. They're all related,
Hmm.
raising their young together, whereas dogs are a group. And she goes into detail about it too, and not to get too deep into this, but she goes into detail talking about how the wolves that dogs come from are not the
No,
wolves that are today. They are
they're
a
not modern
completely
day.
different gene.
No, the
Yep.
modern day wolves are, yeah, they all came from this, it's the same ancestor and branched off,
Yep.
but dogs don't come from the modern day wolf. No, they
Nope.
do
And
not.
and we don't know what their
Correct.
hierarchy was or what their breakdown was, because
Mhm.
weren't ever able to study them. So there's a high probability that they didn't even have the pack mentality like our current wolves do.
So I think I tell people all the time, defining things is super important when we're talking about anything like
Mm-hmm.
this, right? So for instance, I think a reason why a lot of people call it a pack is they might not even think that dogs are pack animals, but like
Mm-hmm.
what do you call a group of dogs? Do you always just say, "Oh, my social group"? No, like it's just easier to say, "Oh, my pack."
Yeah.
Right? But also, pack is a collective noun that you can use for dogs, but you can also use a kennel. A kennel of
Mm-hmm.
dogs is a collective noun. Same with a mute. A mute of dogs is also a collective noun. So if we define it like that, and kind of like, I just try to stay away from just calling it a pack. I just call them a group. That's what I
Yeah.
say. It's just a group of dogs. Because it allows us to to really define it and know what we're talking about rather than
Mm-hmm.
misinterpreting each other and saying, "Oh, you think dogs are pack animals, huh?" And start arguing about it when they might not.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely. And I just call them family.
yeah,
It's my family. Because that's
yeah.
what it is. A lot of the breakdown is, and I explain to my own clients, is although dogs are not like people or like children,
Hmm.
the relationship you have with your dog is like a parent to a child relationship. You're
Oh
there
yeah.
to set boundaries and
Hmm.
teach them and guide them on what you want them to
Yeah.
do. You're not here to just cause, not to be a, you're not here to dominate. You're not here to,
It's
dictate their
it's
life.
a relationship for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I have always had problems with people saying my fur baby is my family, and the only reason why is because they also
Humanize
anthropomorphize.
them.
Yes, exactly. Rather than treating dogs like dogs. And there's nothing
Yep.
wrong to say that, treat dogs like dogs because they are dogs. We
Yep.
have to communicate in a language they understand.
Hmm.
And yes, you can love them like you would love a child, right?
Hmm.
They can be part of your family. Like my dogs sleep on me and I use them as a pillow. I love my dogs, right? Like love my dogs, but I also communicate with them in a way they understand. And it's
It's an
very different than I would communicate with my daughter.
it's an and.
Hmm.
I spoil my dogs and I give them
Hmm.
structure. I
Yep.
love my dogs to death and I have boundaries with them.
Yep.
When you show dogs and even people, you show your love by showing boundaries and creating boundaries and holding expectations. I want you to succeed. So here's how to succeed. That is how I show you I love you. It's the same thing with raising children. And I know that you say that they're not the same. And I totally get that. And I am very much in
I
the
mean,
same
there's
aspect.
a
But
lot of
but they're
similarities though with
but
toddlers and
yeah.
dogs. There's a lot of
Yep.
similarities. I'm not going to deny that.
But
I
it
am
totally
not
isn't.
going to
It's
deny
it's
that.
an it's an and. I love my
Hmm.
dog and I
Yeah.
can set, I
Yeah,
set boundaries. And,
I even tell clients all the time, like, hey, you have a kid. If your
hmm.
kid was up your ass all the time, like, mom, mom, mom,
Uh-huh.
mom, and you were busy working, you would say,
Hmm.
go somewhere else. I'm like,
Yep.
why don't you do that to your dog?
Yep. Hmm.
Set those boundaries. They need it.
Hmm.
The structure. Uh, yeah. Yeah. So
Not to get off topic. I
Mhm,
know
yeah,
this is
I'm
just to
completely
take
okay with off topic. We can go
I
anywhere.
I talked when I first opened my service dog program, and I've been actually want to talk to you about this for a long time with all of our TikTok videos, just because I think you'll get a hoot out of this, and I'm really curious to kind of get your input. But
Yeah.
I was working with I was contacting some local service dog programs before I opened my own nonprofit because I wanted they kind of recommended like reach out to others, see if you can collaborate instead of just creating a whole new nonprofit. It makes it easier. It's takes significantly less time, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So I reached out to one of the local service nonprofits in North Dakota. I won't say name names, but I she goes, oh well, we'd be more than happy to talk to you and kind of see if you'd be a good fit. I said that'd be great. I'd love that. And we ended up just sitting down talking over the phone. And her first question was, what kind of trainer are you? I said, well, I'm a balance trainer. And she goes,
Yeah. So,
it
uh,
gets better. Hold on one
okay.
second.
Yeah. Tell me.
She goes, you cannot teach a dog how to think independently if you are only ever offering corrections. And I said, well, it's not. I
That's
focus on a
they.
positive
So
reinforcement,
she
but they
doesn't know what
need to
balance
know
training
what's
is.
so yeah. And I said, but they need to know a right or a wrong. She goes, well, you can't expect to correct a dog and them to understand because dogs can't read human body language and humans can't read dogs' body language. And then so I asked her, I said, so what do you it hurts your brain. So I
Wait,
said, well,
she's in management at a nonprofit pet
yep.
shelter. Yeah, and thinks
Mhm.
that humans can't read dog body language.
And vice versa.
I mean, and I can understand how she doesn't think vice versa, where dogs can't understand human body language because we're, dogs,
Uh-huh.
and the way their brains work and stuff,
Hmm.
and they're very simplistic in the grand scheme of things compared to humans. But
Hmm.
I can understand that, not
Hmm.
understand that. But us not being able to read theirs, like,
Hmm.
okay,
And her
I know we were
example to
just talking
me,
about Google not being a
hmm
reliable source, but when it comes to understanding dog body language, it is a reliable source.
yeah, yeah, it is. And it's
Like,
terrifying. And her example to me was, well, if you went to another country and you didn't fill out your forms proper and they were yelling at you, you wouldn't understand what they're saying. And I was like, if I'm going to another country, I would learn what their language was so that I knew what they were talking about.
yeah, or you would have an
And
interpreter.
yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah, you would
And
make it work.
that's what dog trainers are. They are interpreters for their
Hmm.
owners.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
yeah, I
I
was
have
just
something
so
similar. I have something similar. So I also outside, Jurassic Park Pet Care, that's my LLC.
Mm-hmm.
I I don't technically own a nonprofit. I'm the executive director of the one I opened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Bulls Bay Canine Academy, and that's where my YouTube channel is, really
Okay.
based off of. And it's really working with what I do mainly is, with reactive and aggressive animals. And I'm mainly primarily focused on strays and shelter dogs to get them to where they are behaviorally fit to be adopted rather than spend
Right.
their entire life in a
Yep.
shelter or being euthanized, right? And also I utilize it for a lot of education. Like I do a lot of free seminars within the city, and I it's a lot of outreach, right? Just like you said, it's a lot easier to start working with a already established not-for-profit.
Yeah.
Um, but my values and views never align. And just like you, like I had to start, I'm gonna name call. So Humane Society here in Jacksonville, Florida, I had to stop working with them because anytime that I would try to work with a dog, I would have somebody that probably got their ABC certification and tell me like here's a good example. We had a dog, and I have a video I recently posted of this. The dog is pulling so much on the
Mm-hmm.
martingale collar, and I'm surprised they
I
actually
saw
allowed.
this. Yep.
Yeah, and it
Had the.
was having, is injuries on his neck from where it is just rubbing him raw from him choking himself.
Yep.
And and of course in the little areas where they don't have cameras outside I'm walking, I'm like, I'll do corrections right there, right?
Yep.
Stop the pulling right then and there,
Yep.
and then be done with it, right? But the problem I have is when I have a dog that is hardcore pulling or is a run risk, so they're going to run and choke themselves out, I have
Mm-hmm.
them closer to a hill, right?
Yeah.
And I had somebody, this is what my ending point. I had somebody from their behavioral team that came up to me and it's just like, we let the dogs have the full lead
Why?
and and so for now on, if you could let them have the full lead. And I was just like, I
But
know
your dog,
I'm
you're giving a dog freedom that they haven't earned.
yeah, so I let her know. I'm like, I know that I'm just a volunteer in your eyes, but your boss, the lead behaviorist here, actually contacted me to come work here, volunteer here to
Yep.
work with your dogs. I
Mm-hmm.
said, so I would take it up with him because at this point, anything I say goes,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, it's one of those where it's like, this is going to be a problem because anytime I try to do any type of aversion, I'm going to have somebody like stink eye me. And
Yep.
it's like, I'm going to start my own not-for-profit.
Yep.
I'm going to start my own not-for-profit. And what's really funny is you have a lot of these people that will home foster these dogs to open up room in the shelter, right?
Yeah.
And they're not supposed to, but they actually will contact me because, again, I do with the not-for-profit, I do a lot of outreach. So I do free training sessions for stuff
Mm-hmm.
like this. And they'll actually contact me as like, hey, can you come out and do some training for this dog? They
Mm-hmm.
really need it, but we just can't let the shelter know. And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Which I
Like,
find that so interesting because
yeah.
in the locations that I've been in, sorry not to interrupt you, but
No,
the
you're
locations I've
good.
been in is so as a nonprofit myself, as working with other nonprofits, is the hardest thing to get paid for is the cost of training
Hmm.
because only 15 to I think it's depending on the grants you get, only between 10 and 20%, and it might be 15 to 20%. Only I think it's under 20% typically can of your total cost of your grant. So if you have, $100,000, only $20,000 of that can go towards paying employees and or towards like the cost of the
Yep.
building, the cost of like stuff like that. So it's a really hard situation for places to get hired trainers because they can't afford it
Yep.
because the
Yep.
grants will give it to them. And
So,
so a lot of places where I'm at, I'll come in and I'll do training for free or we'll do it as a tax write-off. And they are so thankful for it because
mhm.
they don't have, 4, 5, 6 grand to spend,
Yep.
even at a discounted aspect of it.
Yeah. 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 So like Jurassic Park, my LLC is the biggest donator to my nonprofit,
Yeah.
and at
Yep.
that point, okay, donate it in, it's not taxed there and it's tax write-off on my other one. It helps me
Yep.
out, but it also allows me to pay the bills on the nonprofit side. Um,
Yep.
and it's crappy that I have to do it like that, but it's the
Mhm.
only way I can actually successfully do it. And right
Yeah.
now, I I had a it's not gonna y'all won't hear it on the podcast from my last recording. That's it's a future episode, just like this is a future episode. Um the guy I was talking to, he's seen the waves I'm making on different platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, he's like, you're in Florida. If you don't have a gun, you might want to get a gun because there's so many extremists out there that when you're making waves like you are when it comes to using punishments and calling people
Mm-hmm.
out for what it is, he's like, somebody might go crazy on you. And,
Right.
and it's the reality of it. Like, here's an example. I am in the process of making a of creating a nationally recognized certification program for balance training, focusing on reactivity and behavior modification with aggression, right? The thing
Yep.
is, after I make the certification program, I'm going to have it out for almost free for
Right.
anybody to take so I can even the playing field and people can actually have a proper education on it and understand this side of training and the
Right.
know-how and they can jump into this field, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's going to rattle some people. It is going to
Yep.
rattle some people, and I'm okay with that. 100%. Like yeah, yeah, I could go on and on about that. I'll save that for TikTok rants. Uh, but yeah, no, I've
But
had the same.
but I think there's also for so long, dog training has been not very common or taboo,
Hmm.
or you pay me and I'll give you the information in my brain.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not, that is not.
I don't charge people for information. I charge them for
Nope.
showing up.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yep.
anybody, it doesn't matter if you've paid me before or not. You can just contact me, and ask me questions, and I'll answer to the best of my ability. But if I
Yep.
actually have to show up, then that's when we're
Hmm.
charging.
Yep. Yep.
Um, yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna digress back to the topic. So no, for sure. One last note. Yes, I've had the same experiences with other nonprofits and
But I think
your
it even,
moralities don't need to be pushed on dogs. It just like if you're vegan, your dog doesn't need to be vegan. Your
mhm,
moralities don't need to be pushed on dogs. Like there's if you have to choose between euthanizing your dog and punishing them, pick punishment,
mhm.
please. Okay.
Well, and I think it doesn't even fall even within or under um nonprofits. I think,
It's the masses, man.
yep.
It's the
Yep.
masses, and it's because we've been indoctrinated into this whole idea of, we want to, we're taking care of them. We have to treat them, the best, right?
Hmm.
And you should feel bad if you don't do otherwise. But so one person what is the best compared to what I think is the best, is very different, right? And so
Absolutely.
that's why I'm putting it out there like what is best for your dog? Like I think one of my hot topics to come up with all the time is positive reinforcement only training. So only positive reinforcement. So positive reinforcement only training is unethical,
Hmm.
right? And people get so livid about that. And I'm like, look, if you are only using one little section of the four quadrants of operant conditioning, right? If you're only using that, you're setting your dogs up for failure.
Yep.
Setting them up for failure because what you're doing is you are teaching them, yeah, positive reinforcement's amazing for shaping behaviors and stuff, but you're only
Hmm.
teaching them what you want, right?
Yep.
You have never and you will never teach a dog what not to do if you don't teach them what not to do.
Yep.
So the moment that something else is more enticing than those treats, your dog is going for it and you won't be able to do anything about it. And that also includes running out in traffic.
And then that's, yeah, and that is, it's the same thing with it. People don't realize that they have balanced training is used on them every single day.
Yep.
Look at speeding. You have to abide
Hmm.
along what the speed limit is. Otherwise, the consequences, you're going to get a ticket,
Yeah.
and then you're going to get another ticket, and then you're going to lose your license. Like, that is a consequence. That
It
doesn't
is.
mean that it's a bad one. You weren't hurt.
Hmm.
No one did
Now,
anything mean to you. You
punishment
just,
doesn't mean abuse. It just means reducing
yep,
a behavior. And that's something
yep.
I try to mainstream as well. People see punishment and they think punishment means like hitting your dog or whatever. It's like,
Hmm.
no, like I can stop a walk to reduce leash pulling, and that's a
Hmm.
punishment.
Yep.
I can say no to my dog. That's a punishment.
Yep.
Like it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be severe, but it needs to be at the level that works for that dog in front of you.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with e-collars. And I'm not a I use e-collars. I
Yep.
think they're good in the right hands. But I always explain it to people in a very similar aspect of, and I'm such a I love giving examples, but I say if your child walked out in front of a car and you grabbed them by their hair and you pulled them back, they're going to cry and go, "Oh my God, you pulled my hair out. That hurts so bad." And you go, "But you didn't die."
Mm-hmm.
That is
Yep.
the
I've used the
epitome
same
of a
I've used the same car thing
yep.
plenty of times. What I say is like if a same aspect, but I always say you grab them by the arm, yank them back, and they hit the
Yep.
ground, right?
Yep.
Um, you'd be considered a hero. But if
Yep.
I do it to a dog, I'm considered an animal abuser.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Makes
And
no
that's
sense.
I was as even like with the e-collar, us you got a little bit of pain because I pulled your hair out, but you didn't die because and you learned, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that. Yes,
Yep.
there is sometimes going to be something either uncomfortable or unpleasant that may be happening, whether it's a cookie getting taken away or some kind of stimulant added, whether it's a shock or a pop. But I'm not doing it out of because I'm mad. I'm not, there
Mm.
is no emotion when it
It
comes to
has to
it.
be
It is
neutral.
literally,
Very
yep.
neutral. Like the only
Mhm.
emotion I have to dog training is excitement when they do something awesome.
Yeah.
Other
Yep.
than that, it is very neutral. I am
Mhm.
neutrally correcting. I'm neutrally giving punishments because I know that anything my dog doesn't do properly is because I haven't trained the dog.
Yep.
That's my fault, not the dog's. The dog just hasn't learned yet.
But I think there's a preference aspect of it of yeah, but we still are using positive reinforcement. We're just
Mm-hmm.
using it with the other
Mm-hmm.
conditioning operations as well. And that's where people get so well, you're always correcting your dog. Yes, because they have to learn what they can't do as well as what they
Mm-hmm.
can do.
Mm-hmm.
People get so caught up on that. Is we're doing all of it.
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
just being mean.
If we could give our dogs treats all day long and that's all we ever had to do, we would do it. We
Yep.
would. I love
Mhm.
giving treats. I
Yep.
love it. It's my favorite thing to do, but it's not reality for dogs.
Anytime I go in the car, I always find myself at one of the pet stores and I'm buying something for my dogs. And I
Every
have
time. Every time. Every
pretty
time.
much, yeah. I
My
will
wife,
literally,
my wife could tell you every single if I'm with her at the store, she'll find me in the pet aisle.
yep,
If I
yep,
go to the store without her, I always come back with something for them. She's like,
yep.
they have enough toys. I'm like, no, they don't.
No,
No, they don't.
no,
Oh,
yep,
they have enough treats. They don't have this type of treat.
uh-huh. Yeah, but what about this one? Or like
Yeah,
we just butchered a horse and we have all these bones. I
yeah,
went to Sportsman's and they had a water buffalo horn with pizzle inside and I was like,
yeah,
I'm gonna get this. And
yeah.
he's like, why? I was like, because they don't have this. He's like, we have like 7 or 10 bones at home that are
But
smoking ready to
not
go. I'm
this
like,
bone.
but they don't have this one. Yeah. Yeah. Ellie picked it
Yes,
out. It's what she wants. And yeah. So there's totally like,
absolutely.
yeah.
How do you feel? Because we've talked about a lot of bone stuff like
Mhm,
horns. Can
mhm.
horns splinter and do that stuff too, or is it a little
Not as
different?
much.
Okay.
So you have to find one that is safe within the size of your dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I always recommend, especially for chewers, you know, that you see these bully made boxes and like, you know, the indestructible toys. If you want something indestructible, get antlers, whether it's the water buffalo horns or deer antlers. And if you want them to be more intrigued by them, get the ones that are split in half because they have access to the internal marrow. As they get smaller, they can, you know, and they can like break them in half. Sometimes you have to be careful, but if you get a nice long one, they're perfect for dogs. They are a wonderful choice for chewing. They're good for cleaning their teeth. You just don't want to get a huge one for you want to find one that's size appropriate. Otherwise, you can cause damage like
Yeah.
tooth chipping or something like that. But it is a natural thing for dogs to chew on bones and to chew on antlers, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's a great option.
So as far as like the dental thing you were just talking about,
Mhm.
how do you feel about greenies? Like those
I think they're a big
dental
filler.
treats?
I
They're a
think
big filler.
there are great options. There are much better options out there is what I'm trying to say.
Mm,
You can find there are so many brushing your dog's teeth is great, you
yep.
know,
That's what I do.
and everything else. And I don't. But
Hmm.
I also the diet that I feed doesn't require me necessarily to brush my dog's teeth
Hmm.
because they do a lot of bone chewing. They do a lot of, you know, stuff like that. And so I think that treats like greenies are really bad because they are primarily a filler and they're not actually really providing anything. I think the water additives for like the fluoride water additive, they
Hmm.
don't have any actual use for them. They are not helping the dog. They're just taking in.
And I feel like with that, like the reason why I've never used them is because I've seen dogs eat them, and it's just like they chew on like one side of the mouth and swallow
Yep.
down. It's like don't
Mhm.
in order for it to work like how it's supposed to, they would have to continuously chew like we would
Yep.
chew on
Mhm.
something, and dogs just don't do that.
And that's
Um,
why I like the rubber like tennis balls.
mhm,
Not the actual tennis balls, but like the Kong styled
yep.
ones or like the big Jolly balls. They're great because they sit there and they actually have to chew
Hmm.
and they gnaw them and they clean their teeth and they actually are it's a natural way for them to do that. Same thing with bones. Raw chicken bones, raw, or you can even do like the up here we do a lot of either freeze dried or dehydrated.
Hmm.
The whole prey dehydrated treats, the dehydrated chicken feet are really great.
Hmm.
Rabbit feet, stuff like that. The heads, something where they have to sit there and crunch and and it gets around their mouth, and that's really really good for them and it's also healthier for them. You don't have the extra fillers.
Yeah, yeah. The only reason why I get away with brushing my dog's teeth almost every single day is because they've created, dogs can train themselves.
Yep.
And they've created a habit of anytime I go to brush my teeth, they sit there next to me wagging their tail, just waiting for it to be their turn. It's just
Yep.
it's a game to them. They
Yep.
enjoy it. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, if you guys are gonna enjoy it and just let me do it,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it.
Why not? There's nothing
Yeah,
wrong with that. I love that. I
yeah,
think that's awesome.
yeah. So what's the impact of processed foods on pet health?
It's the same thing as processed foods on humans. But I think I before answering that, I want to preface of what is a processed or filler or what that
Hmm.
is. So
Yeah.
people think that corn and rice and oats and stuff that are all fillers. And yes, they are.
Hmm.
However, they're also providing certain things. Corn is one of those that is very low. It's a very low nutrient dense food. So it can be more considered a filler, whereas like oatmeal and rice are a lot more nutrient dense, and so they aren't necessarily a filler.
Hmm.
So it makes your dog fat. It adds on calories that are not necessary. It takes a longer time for them to process through their body, and so they are going to store that a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so it just over time it causes weight gain. It can be causes a lot of plaque. It can cause artery issues, stuff like that. It's similar to people, and you have to be careful on what kind of fillers you may be using because
Yeah.
some are better than others.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubts. So I know you talked about byproducts a little bit, but
I was
like
just gonna ask about that. Yeah,
a lot of people think that byproducts are scary and bad.
yeah.
Let's dive into byproducts because yeah, we need
I
to know more
have.
about it.
I was just gonna say I would like to talk about byproducts because it is one of the biggest aspects of nutrition that I talk about that people really get up in arms about because the verbiage non-byproduct is literally just the leftover animal after the valued part's been taken off.
Mhm.
And this is coming back to that, that pack mentality of you use the term, you need to understand the term to be able to
Mhm.
use the term.
Yeah.
Byproducts are whatever's left over the animal, whether it is, the bones or the maybe unsavory styled of meats, it's the internal organs, everything else of the animal that, it's been taken off, all of the fun, good products have been used, and now this is what's left over. It
Which
is not a
is all good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
like
Yep.
after you say it like that, instead of just saying byproducts, like you broke it down
Mhm.
like the internal organs and stuff like that
Mhm.
and the bones, like that's awesome.
Mhm.
Like I would love to, give my dogs like raw internal organs for
Yep.
them to eat. Like they would love it.
And so and I always explain to people, especially too, because like even myself, I technically use byproducts because I process all of the muscle meat and
Hmm.
then the carcass, the internal organs, those are all just byproducts. And I
Hmm.
use that. And so when you're making a raw diet, and even if you're making a kibble, you still have to add in organs because they need all those vitamins from those organs. You have to add in liver and kidney and
Hmm.
whatever else may you decide to use within those organs. That's all a byproduct. And people get caught up because they think that the bowel gets put in there. They think that it can poison the meat, and it really doesn't. If they use one of the best and most nutritious things for dogs is actually the inner lining of the stomach.
Hmm.
The tripe has so many vitamins and minerals in it. It is one of the best things you can actually feed your dogs. It just has to be properly cleaned. So when they are using these animals and are using the quote unquote byproducts, they do use the stomach, they do use, the intestines like that, but they're all pre-cleaned. And people throw a fit and they're like, well, the intestines are bad. if you eat a sausage, you're eating intestines. Like that's just how
Mm-hmm.
it is. And so
Mm-hmm.
the verbiage of byproduct sounds so bad because it sounds like it's tossed away, it's bad, but it's really just what was left over after,
Yeah, well,
after they've been butchered for even human consumption.
yeah, so let me I love doing this when it comes to language, right?
Hmm.
Like let's break down the word byproduct. We already know what product means, right? What are they actually meaning by by, right?
Yeah. I'm curious to hear I'm curious to see what you pull up for that.
Yeah,
Bear
so
with me. I'm gonna put you on
so
mute for a second because one of my
yeah.
dogs is getting picked up.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so byproduct. I love this, okay? So I always just type in byproduct. If you want to ever look up a word or something, it's just what you need to do is type the word and then type in etymology, etymology, and then which is the study of words in language. And that will, if you do that in Google and just type it just like that, the word and etymology, you will find exactly where that word came from and how it derived and what the actual parts of the words means, whether it's different parts of Latin or Old English or whatever it is and how it became today, right? And so if we look at the word byproduct, um, we the first part of it is talking about old English bi, which is near and by during about. But if you scroll down a
Hmm.
little bit, this is where it gets interesting, right? So it has 38 distinct definitions of it as a preposition. Originally an adverbial participle of place, which since survives in place names like Whitby, Grimby, etc., right? But elliptical use for secondary course was in Old English opposed to the main course, right?
Hmm.
So if you look at that, we have byproduct, the secondary course, the secondary parts. It's nothing bad. It's the secondary course of the product. So you have the
Hmm.
main course, the meat, right, and the fat. And then you have
Yep.
the byproduct, which is the secondary course, the secondary parts of the animal.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That really breaks it down. I like it. I didn't have to do that, but I wanted to.
I think sometimes having that secondary aspect of information just
Hmm.
gives more meaning behind it. It gives a
Yeah.
little bit more understanding. And um, I think it's been deemed so scary within the pet world
Mm.
because
I'm not gonna lie, I'm just gonna say it's a lot of people that are uneducated writing
Mhm.
articles and then
Yeah.
and they're putting them on like the dog mom, dog dad type forums, and then you read through it and you're like, oh my God, they use scary words and they talked about it poorly because they don't know what they're talking about.
And this is the
Misinformation.
hardest
That's
part
just
is
really
my brain needs a reason why.
hmm.
Why is it bad? Why is it this? Why is it
Yeah,
that? And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
people go in and just are like, "Well, it's bad." And I'm like, "But I don't
Hmm.
but why?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know. It's just it sounds scary." So I'm just it's the secondary aspect of the meat. So obviously it's what everybody doesn't want to eat
Oh
anymore.
yeah.
And I just I need my brain needs a why. It needs information, needs education. I need
Hmm.
to have like anytime that I find something new, or even like when I got into the
You start
nutrition world,
researching
I
into it.
jumped so far into it.
I don't believe half of anything other people tell me either, even if they're an
Mhm.
expert in the field.
Yep.
If they tell me something, it's like, I'm glad you told me, that's really interesting. But then
Yep.
I go research and dig into it more, because
Yeah.
I want to confirm,
Yeah.
and anybody that listens to me talking about dog training, confirm. You don't
Yep.
have to listen to me, but it's
Mhm.
the same way when people get really mad at me when we're talking about dog training and we're having opposing opinions on the right training methodologies. I always end up saying, show me proof of concept.
Yep.
And I get so much backlash for that. It's like, I don't have to show a video. It's like, why not? I show
Yeah.
mine, I have proof of concept. I have beginning and end
Mhm.
results, and I'm showing them.
Yeah.
If somebody's just telling me something without proof of concept in training, I'm not going to believe them.
Yeah.
But it same applies to anything else. Like if you're gonna sit here and tell me that feeding once a day is better and stuff, I believe you. I do. I respect you. I believe you.
Mhm.
But I'm probably gonna end up looking into it later today. You know?
But yeah, and
Yeah.
but I think that we have to do our own research to come to our own conclusion.
Hmm.
I think that comes with any aspect of life, but when it comes to when you make a decision for yourself, you have to figure out what's right for you in your life. And
Yep.
if you're following, blindly, and you don't have any thoughts of yourself, then you're not making you're not making educated um selections. You- you're being part of the
Decisions. Yeah.
masses, and
Yeah.
it's terrifying. And so I think that with any education I provide, I always give um links to where I got the
Hmm.
information, or I have screenshots and specifically show exactly what I'm pulling from and why it's there. And it's not some, fun little, ma and pa page where
Hmm.
it's like, oh yeah, this is my opinion. My information is pulled from reputable people
Hmm.
with, hours of research behind it. And even they can be wrong sometimes, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
But
and
we
even
do
asking a
our
second
best.
opinion from another expert is great
Yep.
too. People do it all the time with their own medical.
Yep. Mhm.
Why
Yeah.
don't we do it with everything else?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, like I love the term echo chamber, right? I
Mhm.
love whoever invented that term. Oh, you're part of the echo chamber. It's great because it's really what it is. If you can just word vomit something you've heard, but when you start getting questioned about it, you can't really say anything past
Yep.
what you're echoing.
Yep.
That's a problem. That's a
Mhm.
problem. Whenever I have an opinion and somebody wants to challenge that opinion, I welcome it because I can go into hours of depth conversation about it because
Mhm.
I'm very well versed because I will not form a solid opinion. I will not idolize something. I will come up with an opinion based on facts that I have learned, all the research. And again, like you said, I can be wrong too. I can
Yep.
be wrong too. Absolutely. But I am willing to change that opinion if better facts come out.
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. This is one of the ones that I've been wanting to ask. This is my
Sure.
personal question regarding pet nutrition because I am ignorant on this subject. What is holistic? Is it a buzzword? Like, for instance, earthborn holistic dog food. Like,
Mhm.
what is holistic? Like,
Yeah. It was one of those coined terms that wasn't. It's a word that people use to get attention.
mhm,
It's a word. It comes in every aspect of life, but particularly in the dog world, they use the holistic word as a coin term to get people's attention, to scare people, to get them to move towards their stuff. Um, the idea originally with the holistic word just means whole body, well rounded. Like um you're doing something for the dog as a whole, or whatever it is as a whole, instead of potentially focus on one aspect of it.
okay,
So it doesn't mean anything. It's not like, it's not like the word organic where, technically
yeah,
anybody can use the word organic unless it's certified organic,
hmm,
because the word has not been deemed as an actual meaningful word. And that's the issue. And I'm trying to figure out what the verbiage I'm looking for. Certified organic is a term that has actually been patent. That's what we're looking for.
hmm,
It's a patent word that you cannot use unless you actually have
hmm,
gone through the stages for that. Holistic has been set as a non-patent word,
hmm.
so anybody can use it.
Okay,
Same
so
thing with locally sourced or an organic. Anybody can use them to make their stuff sound good without any repercussions coming back.
so you I'm gonna start doing this, right? There's so much bad press on balanced dog training, right?
Yep.
And if you call yourself a balanced trainer, they're gonna automatically think that you're just shocking a dog into submission,
Uh-huh.
right? I'm not a balanced trainer. I'm a holistic trainer.
Yep. Hmm.
Like
Yep.
it's saying the same thing.
You 100%. Yep.
Awesome. I'm really gonna start telling people that when they
And the
start getting mad about the balanced training thing, I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm a holistic trainer.
Yeah. I'm using every avenue within the dog's life to create the
Yeah.
best life for them. That's it's really what it
Honestly,
is.
it should be a new thing. We should start coining that and people should start
Right.
using that, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, yeah, get rid of the
And
bad
that's
press.
and for a long time it actually was coined very negatively, because the idea for being holistic really
Mhm.
gave the sentiment of hippie and, oh
Yeah,
God, and
yeah.
now people are like, oh, holistic? I love that.
Oh, it's
Like,
because people are, gravitated more, like, people's morals change, their values change, things like
Mhm.
that over time. And, back when it was like, was it classical relationships or whatever, where the dad worked, the mom was
Yep.
the house person, stay-at-home mom, and those type of relationships. That was also when, like, if you were a hippie and you smoked pot and or reefer or whatever you want to call it back then and
Mhm.
stuff, like you were just a deadbeat nobody.
You're a doper. Yep.
Yeah, you're a doper and stuff. But that's changed, over
Mhm.
time, where it's like most people don't care if you smoke pot.
No.
Most, I don't smoke pot. I look like I smoke pot, but I don't smoke pot. And I'm not just saying that for my fan base. I own my business. Smoking medicinally is legal where I'm at. I still
Mhm.
don't smoke pot. I don't care.
Yep.
It's just I used to. It's just
Mhm.
not my thing. Just like
Yep.
I used to drink a lot. Not my
Yep.
thing anymore.
Yep.
But if somebody wants to smoke pot, smoke pot. I don't care.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, it just like you were saying, holistic used to be a word, but now it's like a ooh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. It's like just like I'm sorry, but like people used to be the same way. Yoga. Like, oh, you do
Mhm.
yoga or Pilates, you hippie. And now it's like,
Mhm.
I like yoga actually. My
Yeah.
wife does yoga and I'll do it sometimes. It's like this actually takes some core strength.
Yeah. Oh, my husband, he works for the military. He's not actually in the military, but he works for the military. He
Hmm.
does a lot of workout stuff. And he'll lead the commanders through, chair yoga and,
Hmm.
different stuff. And they love it. It is like
Oh
going
yeah.
from, ask, don't tell to, commanders are doing chair yoga over,
Hmm.
on the Air Force Base. And they're like, when can we do this again? Like, can we do this again next week? And
Yeah.
so I think there's just such as they understand more about what it means, it
Hmm.
helps, but it also has been so overused and abused that
Yeah.
it can become scary
Yeah.
and it's to a point to where you don't actually know what that means.
Yeah. Yeah. So like in the dog food world, like holistic really doesn't mean shit.
No,
Um,
and I think Holistic Earthbound, the one that I have it's the pink brand. It's the one I was talking about
mhm.
initially when we first started talking. They coin on being a fully non-synthetic
Mhm.
food.
Yeah.
And none of it, and I looked at their stuff and it's going and it goes back to the conversation of when you cook something at such a high temperature, you're going to lose out on so much of those vitamins and minerals that you have to add in at some point. So they say they're non synthetic, but it really, what does that mean though? What do you guys determine as non synthetic? That's where that just means that they're adding in vitamins from other sources, which is great, but it doesn't mean that the body is going to necessarily be able to process it
Mhm.
any better. It's just
Yeah.
going to potentially do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. What about like, um, is there really any big benefit or difference other than like, ethos, to like, uh, grass-fed beef versus just a regular beef and the foods, stuff like that?
So this is actually an interesting. I was just talking to my husband about this actually, and so they actually there's been new research study coming out that actually has shown that if you as a human eat grass-fed beef, they do not consider that as red meat because it's not grain finished, so it actually does not have the same implications as a corn or grain finished cow because it doesn't have the same fat content in it.
Hmm.
So it actually doesn't isn't as dangerous and it doesn't have the same
Hmm.
long-term effects that red meat does on your heart and all that.
Yeah.
So and don't quote me on this because this is something that they're still really new on the research, but
Hmm.
I definitely believe that yes, there's a huge difference. Because when you don't have that same, forced fat, because that's how it is. So just as a breakdown for a second, and I'm going to get a little technical. For proper high quality beef, particularly, like the Wagyu and stuff like that, it's a very high corn, and usually a beet pulp or something high sugar
Hmm.
that is fed to them right before butchering, particularly, and sometimes even longer to set a high level of fat content with inside the meat, which makes it more tender.
Yeah.
And so when you have the sugars go up, it affects your body more in multiple different ways. And so when your cow is grass fed, they have consistency, they have natural grass that's coming into their body that has consistent sugars
Hmm.
aspects of it. So you're not having any kind of spikes, but you're also not having that marbling. And
Hmm.
so Um, I think personally there's a lot of benefit to it. I think there's a lot of help that comes with it as well, and I think that it's healthier in general for everybody
Mhm.
because if you think about it, as a dog, they would have eaten, you know, venison or
Yeah.
whatever, your rabbits or that are all eating on the local berries and the fruits and,
Mhm.
the trees and the grass, and so that is the most natural way that they would have eaten, so I think
Mhm.
it's the most healthy.
Yeah, so with the grass-fed beef, would that meat be kind of similar to like horse when it comes to fat
Mhm.
and stuff?
Yep.
Because horses are
Yep.
mainly hay,
Yep.
and grasses. That's neat. That is
Yep.
neat. Yeah.
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 And
So,
cows have a multi-stage and that's so I don't know if you've ever followed any kind of dairy cows. So a lot of meat that we eat in the for ourselves and also a lot of times what we feed and I say ourselves because I primarily feed if I am feeding beef, it's usually from the grocery store.
mhm,
So they are living off of typically it's actually mostly unless they're Angus specific, most of them are dairy cows.
yeah.
You tend to eat dairy cows. That's what they do is they milk them for their years and then they send them off to shipment and they process them into meat. And that's what you get in your grocery store. And so they live off of a pre-processed, and it's not pre-processed in the aspect, it's as a pre-mixed foliage that in some states have stuff like Skittles and other high sugar content additives to it because it's a cheap source of carbs, it's a cheap source of sugar that is added into their diet to make it balanced. And they actually do work with nutritionists, so they are provided really great quality food. But for the way that our body processes
Mhm,
it's a lot harder on us than it would be for just an animal that was grazing.
mhm,
I'm not saying, and I want to preface this, I am not saying that I in any way think that the way that the meat industry is doing anything bad because they are doing a phenomenal job. It's just the way our body processes it is going to be
mhm.
slightly different. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. 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 For sure. You were saying skills. So sugars. How do
Hmm.
dogs process sugar?
Um, it
Like,
can
like,
be
like, do they process it well, or is it something like certain
gotcha.
sugars like stay away from because it's just harmful for them? Or
Yeah, so dogs tend to if consuming a high level of sugars, particularly stuff like corn and everything like that, they're going to store it in their body as a fat and they're going to want to hold on to it long term to
Mhm,
burn it off later once all of their carbs and their fiber and all that is gone.
mhm,
So we have to be really careful with feeding it in general, but as many have heard, chocolate is bad for your dogs, but it's actually the synthetic sugars in there.
yep.
So it's the um exolotl. I don't remember how to pronounce it
Yeah, I know what you're
exactly,
talking
but
about.
they're
Yeah.
now calling it birch sugar or birch tree sugar, and it's very dangerous for the dog. That is actually what causes dogs to get sick. It's not necessarily the chocolate. Do not feed your
Mhm,
dogs chocolate either way, but it's a lot of times the additive sugar that's in
yep.
there that is more dangerous to the dog. So if you are feeding a balanced diet, it's safe. Do not be adding in anything that is sweet. Your dog should not be having Skittles. Your dog should not be having anything fun.
Mhm,
Even like if you have peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you eat the end of it, do not feed that to them because
mhm,
there's so much added sugar in stuff like jam
yep.
that it's severely dangerous to them and
Oh,
can
for sure.
actually cause them to become very
Oh, yeah,
sick.
yeah,
They can
yeah.
have it can actually cause insulin issues in your dog because they're such a small being and they're not designed to have it. You
Mhm.
can cause long-term insulin issues in your dog as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I am 100% against table scraps because
Hmm.
I half the stuff's not even good for me,
Yeah.
but like I don't know how my dog's not a human, so I don't
Hmm.
know since I'm not a professional nutritionist, I
Yep.
don't know if my dog can actually handle that. Will I be
Hmm.
the cause for that final vet visit?
Yep.
And I don't want to take that risk.
No.
No, not at all. Again, like you were talking about like the things inside the chocolate or whatever, the sugar, that's the reason stuff. Same if you're a smoker, I'm not judging you, but pick up your cigarette butts and stuff because
Hmm.
it doesn't take a lot of nicotine to kill a dog. It
Hmm.
really doesn't. It just and especially if you have a smaller dog, oh my gosh, they can eat like two cigarettes and it's done.
Well,
Um,
that's like antifreeze.
mhm.
Antifreeze
It's
is
sweet, isn't it, to the dog?
yep.
Yeah.
Yep, it has a natural sweet flavor and smell, so they will drink it down thinking that
Hmm.
it's delicious, and it actually will go into their stomach and it'll crystallize and it'll actually puncture their internal
Hmm.
organs. So what you do, and this needs to be run by a vet.
Hmm.
You cannot do
Yep.
this at home, but they will feed your dogs high level of alcohol, and they'll actually almost make your dog drunk because the high percentage of alcohol in their system
Hmm.
will cancel out the crystallization of
Yep.
the antifreeze so
Hmm.
they can go through their system and push them
Hmm.
out. But yeah, it's a very dangerous thing,
Hmm.
things that we don't think about and that are everyday stuff, especially now when we're starting to go from
Excuse me.
winter to summer. You're gonna change over it and you're gonna want new
Hmm.
windshield wiper fluid, stuff like that. You're gonna do maintenance in your car.
Yep.
You have to be really careful with that stuff.
Yeah, I had I don't know if you heard me say it at one point, but I had a client last week that told me that their dog has never eaten dog food in the day of their life. Their
Yep.
dog is like 10 years old and they're feeding the dog like full slices of pizza, hamburgers from
Mhm.
McDonald's. Oh, and the kicker was like the dog drinks coffee. It's like
Yeah.
that is caffeine's not good
Yeah.
for a dog.
No, it's so bad.
Not good. Like it can be
Not to
fatal.
mention, why would you want your dog on caffeine?
Hmm. No,
You
I think
know?
it's just I think it's again humanizing. It's like,
Yep.
oh, and then also not I think it's I don't want to say willfully ignorant, but I do think it's ignorant to educating yourself because it in my mind it's like because she was no non she was so nonchalant about it. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, her dog drank coffee one day and it seemed like they really like it. Since the dog really likes it, I'll give him more,
Right.
because I love my dog. I want them to have anything they like. And it's
Yeah.
just like that's inappropriate for
Yeah.
raising a dog.
But that's like your child. You're gonna literally raise the biggest spoiled brat ever,
Hmm.
and then you wonder
Yeah.
why your child's an asshole.
Yeah. 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 Not to make judgments, but it was a small dog. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. It
just putting
usually
that out
is.
there. Putting that
Mhm.
out there. Um,
And I will
so
promise, I have a client, she
mhm.
has a 10-pound Bichon, and she has taken every
Oh
step. She goes,
yeah.
"I saw what I did with my last one, and I do not want to do that again,
Yeah.
and I will do everything I can." And I
Hmm.
commend her for that. But
Oh,
she also
100%.
goes, she goes, "You know how hard it was to find a trainer who that one even had photos of small dogs on their website and or
Hmm.
two had even talked about having experience with small dogs?" And I said, "Yeah, one because it's not as common,
No.
and two, most small dog owners, they don't feel like they need to until it
Hmm.
becomes a problem."
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
I have maybe two small dogs that I have videos of and stuff,
Yeah.
and it's
Mhm.
because the dogs ended up, making their owners bleed. And
Mhm.
it's like most of the time people are like, "Oh, I could just pick this thing up." It's like, yeah,
Yep.
but
Yep.
now when you pick it up and it makes you bleed, like now you call me.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And now
Yeah.
there's so much more you have to do,
Yep.
and it looks so much worse than if we would have just nipped in the butt in the first place.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Mhm.
tell people all the time, treat your small dogs like big dogs.
Mhm.
Treat them like big
Yep.
dogs.
Mhm.
But yeah, so another thing I was wondering is I know dogs will eat like plants and stuff when they have an upset stomach, but is it
Mhm.
also something to do with like nutrition or anything like
Yeah.
that when they
So dogs actually naturally will graze to consume whatever vitamins or minerals maybe they're missing.
Mhm.
So you can have a balanced diet, and depending on the day to day, just like, us, sometimes we need to drink more water one day versus not. We also have a need for different vitamins and minerals. And so
Mhm.
it can be something that's as minimal as soothing their stomach to, they need more whatever vitamins in. Another thing you'll see a lot too is dogs actually will tend to graze right at springtime. Um,
Yeah, that's happening with
because
mine a lot. Yep.
yes, so it's because it's sweet. So the first shoot up of the grass springs are actually the sweetest because it has all of that stored energy from over the winter time. It went to hibernation. So now all of that whatever's left over that it had stored up is now shooting up at its first little
Mhm.
springs. And so I actually learned this before I even had dogs. We have to be really careful because it can actually um, cause issues within your dog and even within your horse. It'll overwhelm their system with sugars. And so you have to
Mhm.
watch your dogs right in springtime because of all of those additive sugars in the grass. So it does
Wow.
taste good. It is delicious. But there is throughout the season, it is something that's just nutritious. It
Mhm.
does have vitamins and minerals to it as well.
Mhm. How good are dogs at figuring out what's um a poisonous plant and what's not?
There, oh, Not.
Okay, that's
Terrible.
it. Yeah, so that was
Yeah.
the reason why I was going to bring that up, is because I know pretty much when the seasons change and stuff like that, I like to put out to email blasts and let people know, hey, here's a full list of poisonous plants, because I know
Yep.
you're about to do your spring gardens and stuff, and if
Yep.
you have dogs and they chew on this or
Mhm.
consume it, it could
Yep.
be a large vet bill.
Yep.
So or worse. And so yeah, I just, some people think, oh, dogs, they're smart enough to figure out, oh, that's not what they want to eat. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know about that.
No, dogs are really smart, and this is kind of where I thought you were originally going. Dogs are very smart at figuring out what they need. If
Hmm.
you give a dog a whole animal, they will eat their percentages
Hmm.
naturally.
Yeah.
They will gorge on the liver and the kidneys, and they'll a lot of times do like the eyes and the brain and stuff like that, and then they'll go back and eat the meat proteins. And so they'll give themselves all their vitamins and minerals that they need, and then once they feel that their body's telling them they're had enough, they'll go to the main protein. So dogs are really great in that aspect,
Hmm.
but they can't decipher on necessarily what's good and bad.
Hmm.
So, the was it the Ponzies or like Easter lilies are very dangerous
Hmm.
for dogs and cats both. Same thing with the red leaved flowers that come in Christmas time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Yeah. So
they're not plumerias. They're
yeah, it's right on the tip of my tongue, but they're
mhm.
highly dangerous for both dogs. And if they fall down,
Sago palms, I know
yep,
are.
yep,
Yeah, there's a lot.
exactly.
There are a lot out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's one of those situations. I mean, puffball mushrooms.
Hmm. Yep.
Those are
Yeah,
highly
I
toxic to
actually
dogs.
I actually put last month I put an email blast out about mushrooms
Yep.
because I mean once they start spreading around your yard, they're spreading, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so we do daily poop cleanup
Mhm.
every day, and because I don't like stepping in it, but I also scour the yard for any mushrooms, and when I see
Yep.
them, I get rid of them because I
Yep.
know my dogs are gonna be like, "Ooh, that looks fun. Let's
Yeah.
chew on that."
Yep.
And I don't want that
And
happening.
and and your dogs, they'll do that. But
Mhm.
you also have to be cautious for the people who like for me, my dogs won't typically eat stuff like that. They
Mhm.
are if it is not what they're supposed to eat, they typically don't eat it. But that doesn't mean that I don't still need to do my due diligence as
Yep.
a pet owner to still make sure to check
Yeah.
because even though my dog probably won't do that,
Hmm.
it's that 1 in 100, 1 in 1 million times that they're gonna go, "Ooh, maybe I will
Yeah.
do this." Or like my female, she is a necessic poop eater. And if there is a mushroom next to her poop and she doesn't catch it and she eats them together, there
Is
it
there
is.
what's the reason for poop eating?
Um, it can come from any number of things. It could come from a crowding of poop in the backyard and they feel like they need to have it cleaned. Some enjoy the taste, some need it for the vitamins. Uh, it, there's it could be a learned factor and it could even actually be a lot of times what'll happen is it's a lack of care as a puppy. So if the mother is not properly cleaning up and caring for their babies, they can, or vice versa. If and this is where it's a double-edged sword. If they're not being cleaned up properly, sometimes they'll think they need to do it themselves, or they'll see their mother do it and so they think they need to do it in their own space.
Oh
So
wow.
sometimes
Yeah.
it can be one or the other,
Hmm.
and you never really can know an answer to it. You never really
Hmm.
are going to have an answer. Mine is terrible. She
Hmm.
likes to have them frozen. She
Yeah.
thinks they're delicious as popsicles. And that is just her preference. And in the
Hmm.
summertime, she doesn't do it, and just in the wintertime. So it's just a preference that
She
she
likes that
likes it.
crunch.
Uh-huh. Yep.
It's
Yep.
so gross.
Exactly. It's so nasty. And my husband made it. I apologize. My husband made the comment. He goes, because we had they had pooped, and then I went to go clean it, but we had a huge snowstorm, and now it's been defrosting. And so they've all had a couple weeks to like start to really, marinate
Hmm.
and ferment. And he goes, yeah, she likes the fermented ones, they're really
They're
nasty.
really good.
All
Yeah.
I was like, you are disgusting. That's
So
terrible.
I don't have to worry about poop eating with my dogs. What I have to
Mm-hmm.
worry about is if there happens to be a decaying animal and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know is back there. And it always happens at like 3 in the morning, right? They
Yeah, of
just have a
course.
random time they need to go outside in the middle of the night. I bring them back in and they smell like rot because they wanted to
Yep.
roll all over it because,
Mm-hmm.
dogs and scents and stuff like that,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And now it's 3 in the morning. They sleep in bed. It's like, no, we have to do a full groom on you guys. I
Yep.
have to do a
Yep.
full groom, bath, blow dry, the whole nine, because
Yep.
I am not letting you get into bed smelling like that.
Yep.
And
Nope. That
yep.
is such a dog. Well, like my cat, we have a dog door. So
Hmm.
he'll go outside, he'll hunt, he'll bring them in,
Oh
and then
goodness.
but the worst part is he'll either bring them in and then he'll have them like half dead,
Hmm.
and then is like he'll either be like, I'm bored of it,
Hmm.
or we'll be like, Bryn, knock it off. And so he'll be like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Or his favorite thing to do is just bring them in fully alive and release them so that
Oh
later
goodness.
on in the
Yeah.
day, or if like in a couple days he's bored, he can go find them again.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely terrible because we've gotten to the point where we've had to, wake up in the middle of the night and my husband's had to go and unfortunately dispatch them. And we
Hmm.
just feed them to the dogs, thankfully. But yeah, he is notorious for bringing them in and being like, oh, here you go. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't need this in my house.
Yeah, so Nazi the Catahoula you saw earlier,
Mm-hmm.
so this was when she was probably like 8 or 9 months, but she started she's really sneaky when it comes to trying to bring stuff inside. My husky is
Mm-hmm.
just like, I have it in my mouth, I'm just gonna hop up in here with it. It's like, no, 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 you leave that outside, right?
Yeah.
But my girl right here, she has learned that if she puts it completely in her mouth and close her mouth like there's nothing in there, you won't
Uh-huh.
know, right? Right.
Right.
So there was one time I saw her, she was basically pouncing around hopping after a frog. And I'm like, cool, that's funny, ha ha, ha, but let's leave it
Yeah.
alone, let's come inside, leave it alone and stuff. And she just comes hopping herself inside. And usually, when she comes inside, if she's been running around, she's panting and stuff. But this
Panting.
time, she's just mouth closed, just looking like nothing's happening. And I'm just like, what do you have?
You.
What do you have?
Uh-huh.
So I go and, open her mouth and pops out a frog, just fully
Oh.
alive, just like hops out. I'm like, dude, come on.
She's a dad. That was my friend. I wanted to keep it.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty
She reminds me of
much.
like a 4 or 5 year old who's like, but this is my friend and I love them so
Yeah.
much. And then
Yeah.
they go and put it into like the little aquarium and then forget
Mhm.
about it for 2 weeks. And then you're like, why is there a dead frog in the aquarium? Like, what is
Yeah.
going on?
So both of my dogs as puppies had a problem for about a week, and each one it was like they were like between 6 and 8 months old, and just
Mm-hmm.
1 week during that time frame, they were eating dirt, and
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know why they were eating dirt, and
Mm-hmm.
like I had to mitigate it, try to get them to drink lots of fluids and stuff because their poops were getting really grainy and
Yeah.
dirt filled, and
Yep.
it's like that's probably not good for your digestive tract.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know, is there like a nutritional reason for that, or is it just
It's
dogs
typically
want
a
to eat
salt
dirt?
content.
Okay.
Yeah, it's totally a nutritional thing, especially about that 6 to 8 months old. They go through that fear stage, and then they also
Mm-hmm.
go through a huge developmental stage. So both mentally and physically, their body starts to mature
Mm-hmm.
because most dogs are physically mature or mostly, internally physically mature at about a year old.
Yeah.
So they're having a huge change at that time. So their bodies, you have the magnesium and the calcium and all of that. They're trying to find that out of the ground to help with that growth.
Mm-hmm.
And dogs can have like growing pains, like just like people do, and so
Mm-hmm.
they'll eat. And magnesium's a huge one, potassium's a huge one, and so they'll try and find those naturally to help mitigate and help with those issues.
It's so interesting though, like them like just knowing what to eat,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
instinctually just knowing like I need to eat this.
Well, I was telling my client because they're getting ready to go. Her and her wife are going to go fish for the summer because they fish out and they charter in the summer. And so she was telling me that her dog really likes to catch the fish, and I
Hmm.
said that's great. And she goes, well, can I give that to him? I said yes, absolutely. And she goes, so I just chop it up. I said no. If you're gonna give the fish to your dog, give them the whole animal and let them pick and choose what they need from that dog. You can still give them some of their kibble at night, and once they've had what they need, take it from them so they're not eating a entire
Hmm.
5 to 10 pound fish.
Yeah.
And I mean our fish get up to 20 to 30 inches long, so they get pretty big, especially the salmon. um and so I was like, let her pick and choose what she needs from that, from the body, because the whole animal is going to provide everything that animal needs. Their ratios are going to be almost exact to what an animal needs. When
Hmm.
we feed raw, particularly, it's 5% fruit, 5% vegetable, 5% organ, and 5% liver, and then the rest, and then you do a 10 to 15% bone, and then the rest of it's all muscle meat. If you think about an animal as a breakdown, that's about what the
Yeah.
organs are naturally. And so that's the recipe that we usually follow. And then we'll adjust a little bit as needed. Baby liver doesn't need to be as high if we're having really black poop or whatever it may be. And so, but dogs will naturally kind of pick and choose what they need, and their body will tell them as it comes.
Hmm.
And I think people are like that too. We just are so accustomed to not listening to our bodies
Hmm.
that we don't think about it. And so, I think we have a lot to learn from dogs.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So raw diets, do you find that it's a lot more expensive for a raw
No,
diet? No?
no, because you're only feeding 2 to 3% of your dog's total body weight.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So,
So kibble, I would assume like because this is what I've noticed as well. When my dogs are puppies, I do like highest level kibble, like I'll do
mhm,
like Origin or Instinct or something, so they can just get like 100% their top level growth, right?
mhm,
So that's what I do, and then once they are matured, I bring it back to whatever kibble that I want to give them, and
right.
so with that and stuff, what I've noticed is when I am feeding these heavier nutrient dense, heavier protein, heavier fat, type kibbles, I get to feed them a whole lot less. So even though it's more expensive for the bag, is lasting a whole lot longer. So in the
Yep.
long run, I'm kind of spending the same amount of money for the cheaper
Yep.
stuff and the more expensive.
Well, that really that can be applied also to your protein percent and everything else.
Hmm.
Um, we were talking earlier about weight management and everything else, and um, I always tell people if you have a dog that still wants to eat but they can't, they're on a diet, put them on a little bit lower protein or put them on a significantly lower protein diet. So you can still feed them a little bit more, and they're
Hmm.
still getting, that because a lot of times what people do, like, well, I'll just cut my dog's food back. Well, your dog's down to 1 cup a day. They're going to lose their mind if you have, if you have a 60, 70 pound lab
Yeah.
who's, 20 pounds overweight. They're going to lose their mind getting a cup a day. So if you cut down their protein so they need to be fed a little bit more, you're
Hmm.
balancing out that long term to help them. And same thing,
Hmm.
I work with German Shepherds a lot. Like, German Shepherds are my breed of choice. They're what I
Yeah.
do a lot. And I love them. They're my favorite, but they are notoriously picky for dog food.
Hmm.
So what I tell people, I say, if you have a picky dog, whether it's a German Shepherd or anything, feed a high protein diet,
Hmm.
high fat diet, so you can feed significantly less.
Yeah.
If you have a really high protein diet, and I don't mean like 40% protein, I mean like the 30/20 from Purina is a really great, it's a
Hmm.
high performance
Yep.
kibble. It's really well balanced. You can feed a 60-pound dog, 70-pound dog, a cup and a half to 2 cups.
Yeah, so I'm gonna see what I can't remember off the top of my head what I'm feeding my dogs when it comes to fat and protein percentage. I do know that I originally picked it because it was exactly what I needed. Let's see here. So yeah, so as I'm pulling this up, so when it comes to picky eaters for picky dogs, I do have some people that ask me all the time, uh, what do I do when my dog just refuses to eat the kibble? Like, and I can't afford the more expensive stuff and this, that, and the
Mhm.
other. Um, I let them know, I'm like, don't quote me because I'm not a nutritionist. And that's what I do with a lot of things. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. Do not quote
Right.
me on this. But I
Yep.
do let them know, I'm like, your dog is not going to starve themselves to death.
No.
No, they're not. So even if they're picky, keep putting the food out. They will
Yep.
eat it eventually.
Yep. The
Uh,
Bichon that I was telling about earlier, she is notorious. If she doesn't like, because we've dyed a few different recipes of raw
mhm,
diet, and she'll eat it for a couple days, and then she'll be like, I don't like this anymore. Or like if we add too much bone meal or whatever it is in,
mhm.
she'll be like, no thanks, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And her mom's like, well, she's going on day 2 days without eating. I'm like, okay. And I said, if she's really that hungry, she will eat. I have, except for out of stress, like, and anxiety, I have never seen a dog actively starve themselves.
Yeah.
And when it comes to stress and anxiety and stuff like that, it's usually an abandoned dog or a dog that has severe trauma and they are scared. The only other time, and that's really that's kind of the main breakdown of that is a dog's not going to starve themselves.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they're not. So when it comes to proteins, a seafood-based protein versus a red meat-based protein,
mhm.
is there anything that is like beneficial more so for other than like omega fatty acids, which can easily be added into red meat protein
Yep.
foods? Um, is there any benefits to doing like a salmon-based diet versus a beef-based or whatever diet, a red meat diet?
No. In all honesty, it actually is probably more hindrance than a positive, unless your dog is having actual allergy-based
Hmm.
issues to red meat of some sort. Typically, red meat, like we talked about earlier, red meat is more natural for their body, so it's going
Hmm.
to be easier for them to digest. Seafood is not as natural to their body, so it's a
Yeah.
great additive for those omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids. Um, and you can and stuff like DHA and stuff like that. But that's really easy to add in. So if you're doing a
Hmm.
primarily a seafood based diet, it can be a huge hindrance on your dog's overall diet. Also, dogs need a muscle meat, and it's really hard to provide a high quality muscle meat from fish in general.
Okay. Okay. The reason I was asking is because a lot of times I do switch proteins. And
Yeah.
obviously to avoid blowout, I do whenever I decide to switch proteins, I do, a shift between,
Hmm.
probably between 10 to 15 days of slowly switching it over.
Absolutely.
But
Yep.
yeah, sometimes I'll get, the the salmon or whitefish. It might be duck, it might be beef, but or I don't really do beef. I do bison sometimes, venison, things like that. I pretty much stay away from chicken and beef. That's the two things I stay away from when it comes to my dog's protein. But I do like to switch it up, and it's not really for the benefit of the dog's like palate, but I
Hmm.
just feel like if I just stick to one protein their entire life, it's not how they would be if they were in the wild.
Yep.
Right. And so I think it's just more beneficial with them having a little bit of variety every
Hmm.
so often.
Hmm. And there's nothing wrong with adding variety as long as you are doing the transitional in a
Hmm.
safe, controlled way. You don't want to do a quick change. And we even do that with and this is something that I think kind of is terrifying in the raw world is people think because it's raw to raw, it's fine. You
Hmm.
still want to do a slow changeover. So,
Yeah.
even if we're going from one horse to another, we still mix the old with the new so
Hmm.
that they are getting used to it because they're going to have a little bit it's going to have a different protein percentage is going to have a different fat content. Every
Yeah.
animal is going to be different, so we be careful with that. And same thing with our neighbors, they process rabbits, so they give us all the extra stuff, and so we will add a little bit in at a time,
Hmm.
or stuff like that. And people need to realize that fat content is just as important as protein,
Hmm. Yeah.
because if you do not have any fat in your diet, your body is not going to be able to process your proteins. They're not going to be able to hold on to any of those vitamins, and it actually becomes very dangerous
Hmm.
for your dogs and for themselves as well.
Yeah, so I already know this information about how the process works on different nutrients utilizing the fat to process through your system. So can you explain a little bit more in depth though, how that works with the fats and the other nutrients?
Um, this is always the area that I always have the hardest time explaining because there's so many verbiages that I can't remember.
Hmm.
Um, Not really.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
This is always the area that I have the hardest part within my
no, not a
nutrition
problem, not a problem.
training.
So basically, from my understanding is if you look at them at a cellular level, if you look at the different proteins or nutrients at a cellular level, a lot of them, in order to be absorbed in the system, they have to connect to something else, right? And that's what the fats do. The fats allow them to connect together to be able to be absorbed, in the most simple way possible.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of
Yeah,
explaining it. Yeah, I
yeah.
like that.
So, that's my explain like I'm five version of that.
Yeah, I've done a couple of videos on it, and they're all saved in my draft on my TikTok because every
Hmm.
time I try to explain it, it turns into a 10-minute conversation
Yeah.
to myself about fats, and it's always the hardest part for me to explain in layman's terms
Hmm.
without going into a 10-minute rant.
Yeah. 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 It's very similar to me with training. Like
Yeah.
I can explain very simply what classical conditioning is.
Mhm.
But if I actually want to tell you how it works, it can
Yeah.
get really complex.
Yeah.
It really can because, we're not having a dog make a decision anymore. We're changing an emotion that they cannot control.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, yes, it's simple, like it's Pavlovian, simple, but if you really want to go in depth on the scientific, everything about it, it gets confusing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, did you have anything that was on your mind about nutrition and stuff that you kind of want to touch base with that you think needs to be more education out there for?
No, I think we covered it all. I think this has been wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's been great. So thank you so much for
Thank you for
being
having
here.
me.
Yeah, absolutely. I will talk to you soon, I'm sure. And yeah, thank you all for listening in, and we'll see you next time.